Hey folks, it's Cody Stoffer with Playmakers Corner, here to tell you about Codered Coaching. Competing in athletics means you've lifted the weights, you've watched film, and you've got the passion. Problem is, that's what everyone else in the state has done. Perfect your game by honing in on your mental performance with Codered Coaching. Whether you are a team or an individual, Codered Coaching has the tools to create mentally solid habits and set up you or your team for success. Find Codered Coaching at coderedcoaching.com or call 720-979-1914 to learn more today. That's coderedcoaching.com or 720-979-1914 today. Now back to the show. Hello, everyone. It is your showrunner for today, Cody Stoffer here, and we have another jam-packed week 2 recap for you here. And we have actually rotated hats here as far as who is covering what. So you'll actually be hearing from me first off in 1A, then you'll be hearing from Phoenix in 2A, Gideon 3A, Coach V in 4A, and Gino 5A, and we attended 2 games this week, so we'll get 2 live game recaps along with our power rankings and playmakers of the week as well. So those are all going to be a good time. Those power rankings brought to you by Junkyard Training and Playmaker of the Week brought to you by Codered Coaching. Shout out to those guys. But without further ado, let's talk about 1A Colorado tackle football from this past week. So there was only one 1A team that played on Thursday. That was Jefferson. They beat Littleton 36-12. This was primarily highlighted by Demetrius Martinez, who ran for 4 touchdowns and 265 yards, while the defense forced turnovers galore and big plays in the backfield against a sliding and controversially destroyed, basically, Littleton program on this season. Turning our page to Friday here, Peyton 50-piece Littleton. This was highlighted by Noah Martin, 3 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns, and a nice defensive performance, obviously. Wiggins runs for 339 yards and 4 scores and a 27-12 bounce-back win over Meeker. Meeker sliding down the power rankings and really struggling against some of these really good teams here. We'll see if they're able to regather a little bit and turn the ship around. Now, keeping it in that same league as Wiggins, Ray here stays undefeated behind a combined 300 rushing yards from Midcap and Meisner out of state here. Ray against Goodland, however, was only leading 28-21 heading into the half, but then the defense locked in for a second half shutout, and the offense kept rolling. Midcap ending with 5 rushing touchdowns. Now, a very pleasant surprise this season, Alameda here keeps their season undefeated, rushing for over 400 yards, including 207 from senior Angel Arroyo and a 52-0 win over the Pinnacle here. Also noted for Alameda is that Christopher Garcia here caught 3 touchdowns, and the Pinnacle was held to under 5 yards per play on the big win from Alameda. Now, unfortunately, Trinidad loses to Rayton. That is a New Mexico team, despite Xavier Garcia's 100-yard game, as the defense allowed 2 100-yard rushers on the other side, and they just do not quite win this track meet. Now, in 1A action, Prospect Ridge Academy loses to Manitou Big with a run game notching -7 total yards. Woof. I will let Phoenix discuss the Manitou side of that. In a nail-biter, Centauri beats Pagosa Springs 21-20 here. Now, unfortunately, there's no score tracker or stats that have been put in for the Falcons, despite me really wanting to go in depth with this game, as this is a huge win for Centauri against a tough Pagosa Springs team. I will let Phoenix discuss Pagosa's performance in that one, since they did have stats. Now, in a somewhat exciting 1A matchup here, Lyman outlasted Flatirons Academy to remain undefeated. Now, heading into the fourth quarter, the score was actually tied 14-14 before Lyman scored 21 unanswered in the fourth quarter to slam the door and win 35-14. For Flatirons Academy, Elijah Rika here and Parker Wilson were doing everything they could to keep this game within reach, combining for 24 total tackles and Rika getting 1 for loss. while Caleb Dowdy here also had an interception and a pass deflection to try and slow down the Badger attack. The offense just could not quite get those explosive plays to click and finish those drives in the fourth quarter here, as the Badger defense was getting contributors from everywhere, and then the offense would be lifted up and above by Aiden Koleth, who had 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. But real notably here, freshman Camden Taha here, probably related to Corey here, who had 105 yards and 2 scores himself. Be on the lookout for this freshman coming in and trying to make a name for himself for the Badgers. Now, Olathe beat Center 41-16 to remain undefeated. No stats from that game. But in a big bounce-back win, Caden Madrid and the Monte Vista Pirates trounced Wright High School, with Madrid throwing 12 of 17 for 303 yards and 6 touchdowns. Definitely Playmaker of the Week material here for Monte Vista that wanted to get back into that win column. Now, another team pulling off a crazy game here is Buena Vista, who pulls off a crazy comeback to beat Platte Valley. They were down 28-13 heading into the fourth quarter before the Demons scored 20 points to avoid a home spoiler loss against Platte Valley. Now for Buena Vista, obviously Eli did his thing running for over 200 yards and a pair of scores, but 5 different players scored touchdowns in this game, and the defense recovered 3 fumbles, with Trey Cardwell scooping and scoring on his. That one definitely sticks out in this nail-biter win, where he also had 7 tackles, to go with Abel Flowers' 9 tackles in a big performance by the BV offense and defense down the stretch to come back and avoid this upset loss. Now in other action here, Yuma smashes Roaring Fork here, 50 to very little, highlighted by Jonathan Thompson in a Playmaker of the Week nominee performance here. 3 of the team's 5 interceptions, and 2 of them were pick sixes to go with his 114 yards rushing. Like I said, Roaring Fork ends up throwing 5 picks on the night, and Yuma burns him for it. Now, in a battle of some kind of ridge here, Cedar Ridge loses to Cole Ridge 28-47. No stats for Cedar Ridge. And then the Saturday action was pretty uneventful, honestly. Forge Christian blasts the Academy 45-0. Highland scores 38 in the second quarter of their nearly 60-point win. Holyoke wins massively on the road in Wyoming, and Denver Christian played ticked off and whooped Estes Park 44-18. And I know that is a very brief 1A recap here, but with so many blowouts and so little scores and stats being put in, that's kind of where it leaves us. Still plenty of good storylines and plenty to talk about on the power rankings later this episode. But before Phoenix catches us up on 2A, I'm going to pass the mic to Gid the Kid here for the Wellington Fort Lupton recap.
Hello again, beautiful people, and welcome back to Playmakers Corner. I am your host for this segment, Gideon, and unfortunately today I have a rather short recap for you. This was a absolutely dominant performance here from Wellington. I went to the 2A matchup between the Fort Lupton Blue Devils and the Wellington Eagles, and I thought it would be much closer than it ended up being, but I'm just going to get right into it. Starting out, Fort Lupton, they did come out looking pretty decent. They have some good linemen. Royce Guerrero was looking pretty good, but this game just started on the absolute worst note possible on defense. Fort Lupton allowed a 90-yard passing touchdown from Tanner Gray to Cash Altschwager, after which Royce Guerrero threw to Julian Arreguin for 12 yards with only about 11 minutes and 30 seconds left in the first. On defense, Donovan Bushman got a tackle for loss, and Joel Valdez did as well. But after Giovanni Carlton got hurt briefly, thank goodness, the Blue Devils did allow a 15-yard touchdown with 3:59 left in the first. After that, Guerrero threw to Jesse Soretto for 35, but the offense stalled and the defense did not help, allowing another touchdown. Being honest, this just got out of hand fast. I think if those first 2 scores hadn't happened so quickly, I think this game might have been a little bit closer, but once it reached 3 scores and we were still in the first quarter, there's not much that you can do. And Josiah Gonzalez did a really good job on the kickoff return. He returned to that for about 40 yards, but after Guerrero threw down to Soretto for another 30, and there was another turnover on downs, boom, it was halftime. The game was just that quick. I did neglect to mention 2 other touchdowns for Wellington there, but and Wellington is not a good case study because they are, in my mind, tied for number 1, but this defense does have some work to do in terms of pass coverage. The main highlights for Fort Lupton were Jesse Soretto and Giovanni Carlton. Julian Araguin, he took over quarterback about midway through the second quarter, I want to say. And he actually had a dime that he threw to Soretto for a 73-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter. And Soretto was, he and Carlton were the most impressive players for Fort Lupton in this game. Soretto, I feel like he was just he was shifty, but he also had some pretty good hands. He's a really, really fast player. He was the reason that it ended up being 6-48 instead of 48-0. I feel like on that offense, Soretto was the constant in this matchup. Overall, even though there were 3 different players that completed a pass, one of which was Soretto, he ended up having 120 yards regardless. I really liked Soretto's play in this. I would not be surprised if he ends up being an all-state caliber player. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I think he is a college-level player. I'm not a scout, but based on what I've seen, he's a really good player. He's 6 foot, 205, fast, shifty. I like him. The best player in the trenches, though, without a doubt, was Giovanni Carlton for Fort Lupton. Giovanni, very physical presence. One of the players on the field where he both played and looked his size. So he's probably a good 6'1", 275, 280. He knows how to use it. And so I was able to catch up with Giovanni after the game. So, what up? This is Gideon here with Giovanni Carlton of Fort Lupton High School. Giovanni, not the score that you ended up wanting, but how do you feel a game like tonight prepares you for the rest of the season and hopeful playoff run?
Honestly, it makes our team learn from our mistakes. Like this blowout right here, 48-6. I'll give it to Wellington. They're a pretty sound team with their reverses and all that, especially their blocking. But no, this game was just more of a learning curve than anything.
And next week, you're going to be playing up against Valley, who they have I believe, 3-year starter quarterback in Carson Adolph. Not the most prolific defense, but you're still going to be able to sharpen your iron. What are you most looking forward to?
Just running it down their throats. My running back, Chris Galicia, he's our best running back so far. I love that man. I love him.
Very good. And, last week you guys had a resounding win over Devlin, put the state on notice about the Blue Devils. If you had one word to describe your game and what your outlook is for the season for Fort Lupton, what would it be?
Win.
All right. Thank you very much, Giovanni. Best of luck next week and best of luck for the rest of the year. Thank you again for speaking with me, Giovanni. And listen, this guy's just a good kid. When I was able to talk to him, even after a loss like this, which could very easily demoralize a guy, he walked up, smile on his face, and I could tell that he was ready to go, not only for this week, but his spirits are high for next week. And this is the type of player that you want on your team. Again, best of luck moving forward in this season, Giovanni, and best of luck against Valley. However, now it is time to move on to Wellington's half of this matchup, which I'm going to spend about the same amount of time on because, if I'm being honest, it was just dominant. Wellington is the real deal, in my professional opinion. They are the real deal. It reminds me of Green Mountain last year, and Green Mountain made it to the Final Four. So, for me, Wellington set the tone on the very, very first play. The second that play was done, I knew who was going to win this game. Tanner Gray just threw a 93, well, he didn't throw it 93 yards, he threw it about 40, and then Cash Altschwager just put points on the board with only 20 seconds gone in this game. 20 seconds gone in this game, 93-yard touchdown, already done. Julius Olivo, he got a tackle for loss. Ezra Batjargle, he got a hurry. And then once the offense was back on the field, Gray rumbled for 12 and then threw to Cash for another touchdown. Tyler Schaefer got a pass deflection and then a sack on back-to-back plays. Then Gray got one himself. Lincoln Dalton, he ran for 12. Kyle Kistner, a revelation at running back. As a sophomore, he managed to get another touchdown, made it 21-0. Matt Brown got a tackle for loss. Gray got 2 sacks in like 3 plays, the second of which forced a fumble, which Ethan Thurnes, he recovered it. Gray got another touchdown. It was 28-0 with 10:19 left in the second, and the game was basically over already. Brown got a pick. Kistner got another touchdown. The PAT was missed, but 34-0. With 8:49 on the clock. Gray threw to Cash again for another score, which made it 41-0. And then that enacted the running clock rule while we were still in the first half. Then the sophomore Seamus Pike, he would get a pick, and sophomore quarterback, he got Eli Noel. He managed to get a rushing touchdown, which is some good experience for the guy who's eventually going to take over Gray's mantle. That ended up making it 48-0. Now, Wellington would allow a score from Fort Lupton with 6:02 left in the game. That made it 48-6, but then Draven Rodriguez, he would return the kickoff for about 40 yards, and Wellington just ran out the clock as soon as that was done. And really, that was the essence of the game. It was one of the fastest games that I have ever been to, especially since Wellington has a bye week next week, which we'll get to here in a minute. I am looking forward to seeing the rest of the season, and honestly, this year's squad, I think, would be a playoff team in 4A. That is my hot take, but before I go further, our playmakers of the game for Wellington, starting with our defensive playmaker of the game, Tyler Schaefer, a pass deflection, a sack, and then he also got his hands in for a handful of tackles in this matchup. To be exact, he had 4 with 1 for loss, 2 hurries as well. Just a very good performance here from the veteran. Schaefer is a junior on the squad right now, but he was getting playing time last year as well. So,
what's up? This is Gideon with Tyler Schaefer of Wellington High School. Now, Tyler, a resounding win over a team that a lot of people have slotted for a potential playoff berth. When you're looking at this win and the outlook that it gives for the rest of the season, what do you have to say to the rest of the state about Wellington football?
Yes, sir. I mean, it just shows we're ready. Eagles are here. We're coming out. We're going to have a great season. It shows great momentum, and we're going to go get it as a team, one heartbeat. The Eagles, we're ready.
Hell yeah. And you were active on all levels of the defense tonight when they had you in before it got really bad.
Yep.
You got that pass deflection. You were getting in the backfield. What were you seeing in the offense that allowed you to get those kind of looks consistently?
Just studied film, and when my defense coordinator was yelling at me, just make plays. I don't know.
All right. And looking forward to Mountain View, next game up on the schedule. You're going for one of your first upper classification games moving up. You're going to be facing a team that is shooting for playoffs and was top 20 in 3A last year. What are you guys doing to make sure that you stay in your heads and you stay focused on getting the dub?
Yes, sir. We're going to be in the weight room. I mean, we got a bye week. We're going to really watch film, and we're going to be on our A game when we come back around in 2 weeks. And we're going to be ready for them.
And that's a common theme that I heard from all of the Wellington personnel that I talked to, from players to coaches to even the managers. They're planning on getting really ready for that game against Mountain View. They have a bye week coming up here, and they are not going to take Mountain View lightly. They saw how well Mountain View did against Loveland. One of the surprise players of the year so far has been Kyle Kistner. That's Kyle spelled with a C. But Kistner is only a sophomore, standing at 5'6", 155. But he was actually the leading rusher for Wellington in this game. 47 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. In that last game against Colonial, he had 67 rushing yards and 2 scores as well. He also had 20 receiving yards in this game, and once Cash Altschwager graduates here at the end of the year, I believe that Kistner is going to be one of the main targets here on offense on this absolutely loaded team, along with guys like Tanner McLean. Speaking of Cash Altschwager, 2 years ago, won our 2A MVP as only a sophomore, and he is ready to win. In this game, he had 43 rushing yards, 126 receiving yards, with 3 receiving touchdowns. That's only in 3 catches, by the way. So in all 3 catches, 3 tutties, 2 tackles, and then also a pass deflection. Cash, in terms of skill set, is one of the most fundamentally sound players that I've seen, and it's going to be a shame not watching him anymore. But enough of that. I am going to let Cash speak for himself and for the Eagles this season.
This is Gideon here with Cash Altschwager from Wellington High School. Now, Cash, when we're looking at tonight, play 1. You set the tone, get that 90-yard touchdown. How do you think that impacted the way that this game ended up playing out?
Well, they planned for the run. I could tell they had one of their linebackers come out to cover me at corner, so you knew that they were in a really weird defensive front. So when I saw a linebacker was on me and Tanner talked about this all week. I was like, oh, this is going. Because our coach was like, all right, make sure we have options, like a hitch or a slant or something. And I was like, no, not at all. I was like, I'm going, and I know I'm going. And I saw it was 24, and I was just like, cool. Looked back, ball was in the air, and I was like, oh, I'm gone. I'm gone. So, no, I think it set the tone for it really got the fans into it, and that's just hard on a team comes to an opposing team, especially if they're a long drive. You're just like, big play happens, and you're like, oh, crap. So I think it really set the tone for the whole game.
Hey, that makes sense. And, looking back at last year, you blaze through that schedule. You get to Berthoud, and a lot of people were picking against you. But this year, you're coming in with one of the hardest schedules in the state. What was your attitude heading into the season to make sure that Wellington is properly represented?
Oh, well, it's my senior season. I'm the first senior of this school. So I have to go out with a bang. There's no, thought of this season, I'm going to do good. That was just set my goals. I'm set on making this team better. All summer, we've been grinding. Off days, we'll go even just bond with the team. But we've put work in, and I think it's really going to pay off because that birth game was rough, but I know we all want that back. And it left everybody because nobody left. Everybody came back okay, we got to go work. So I think it'll be a really good year.
All right. And to close it out, if you had one word to describe your game, what would it be?
That's hard. Oh, receiver. Just nothing too fancy. Just receiver. I was my freshman year, I was a receiver at Pooter. And I come here and play running back. And receiver's my happy place. That's just... me and Tanner have worked so much. You put me out wide with him, and I'm just throw that ball up, I'm going to it. So, no, receiver. It's nothing's fancy or anything. I'm a wide receiver.
Thank you very, very much, Cash. And honestly, I really can't wait. It was weird thinking about how after this season I'm not going to be able to really watch you play very much anymore, but I know you're going to land in a good spot. But I saved the best two-way performance for last. That is the man, the myth, the small-town high school legend, Tanner Gray. Tanner, before I go to the interview, in this game, 9 for 13 passing, 205 yards, 3 touchdowns to 0 picks, also had 37 rushing yards and a touchdown, 3 sacks, and a forced fumble. That is one of the most bonkers performances I have ever seen, and I'm not fully sure how to quantify it. But I was able to catch up with Tanner after the game and talk about the evolution of his game.
What's up? This is Gideon here with Tanner Gray of Wellington High School. Tanner, how you feeling after tonight's win?
Feel great. As I said before the game, we got a big schedule, so it's not done. This just set the tone for the game. But with the work we've put in these past 2 weeks after Florida, it's a relief to show that we're bonding as a team, we're coming together, and we're playing as a team, you know? So I just feel great. It's a happy feeling to know that everyone on my team is making an impact, you know? Like everyone is doing their job, competing, and it's a good feeling.
Hell yeah. And, I mean, looking at you as an individual, the growth from last season to this season is palpable. I mean, you're airing it out a lot. Your throwing motion is looking good. I mean, you started off your Colorado season with a 90-yard bomb.
Yeah.
How do you think that this is going to impact not only your game, but the team's season as a whole, having that increased dynamicism?
We just have diversity now. Like last year it was run heavy, and I didn't. Partly it's my fault. I didn't work on throwing the ball. I didn't do my job as a quarterback to work on throwing with my receivers. And we get to berthed and we get stuffed and we get blown out. And that was defeating to me and the team last year. So my one goal this year was to throw the ball and be accurate and work with my receivers and work with my line. And I think that's what's changed. Is this offseason was a big step as a team for throwing the ball. Coach Peoples, we had a big meeting with Coach Peoples about working on these pass plays, setting up gun, and that's created a whole new aspect of our offense where it's unstoppable because we are going 50-50 run, 50-50 pass, you know? And I think just having that is just huge now. So I think the rest of the season is going to be good like that.
Absolutely. Like, moving forward, this just increases, as you said, the diversity of the plays.
Yeah.
And when we're thinking about it, like I'm not saying what I'm about to say to blow smoke, but when it comes down to it, you and Cash are really all-American small-town heroes when it comes down to it. The first of many great athletes to come through Wellington.
Yeah.
And you guys are looking like the first D1 athletes that are going to be coming out of this school.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you and to this community to have two guys like you out here representing?
I mean, there's me and Cash, and I think this connection started when I was a freshman, he was a sophomore, and that's just, we built upon that. But I think the biggest part about me and Cash is we're trying to lift people up around us. So it's not just me and Cash. Like, yeah, we have an impact on this team, on the community, everything, but being able to lift the people up and make everyone better around us and compete at practice every day, that's the biggest thing that we do as a duo, in my opinion. So.
All right. And last but not least, close it out. How would you describe your game, Tanner Gray's game, as an individual in one word?
I'd probably say execution. I executed my pass plays. It was the first game where I really got to throw the ball. I executed my run plays. I executed on defense. I executed being the manager of the offense. And so that led to everyone else executing and doing their job. So I'd say execution.
I mean, 3.5 sacks and a forced fumble. And that's still wild to me.
And the biggest thing that I heard in that interview was accountability. He said it himself. I was not doing what I needed to do last year, so I worked with my guys, and we are getting it done this season. And really, that is what a leader is made of. That is why, heading into this season, he already holds an FBS offer from Washington State. So if you're a team that is looking at him, you better buy that stock soon, because if you buy low, Tanner Gray is going to take you high. But that is all for this episode. I know this one was very interview heavy, but this game was very much a showcase of what Wellington is about, and Fort Lupton provided a pretty good look at some of the top players, and Mr. Soretto and Mr. Carlton. So I hope that you all have a great day, stay hydrated, stay safe, and I will catch you all out there watching Colorado athletics. Peace.
Hey everybody, this is Phoenix Barons with Playmakers Corner, and I'm here to give the 2A recap for week 2. So let's get right into it. Starting off with our Thursday game, September 5th. As of this recording, September 8th. Some teams have stats, some teams do not, so we're just going to go and report based off of what we got. So let's get started. Thursday, September 5th, Lamar at Sterling. Unfortunately, Sterling was not able to get us any stats, but Lamar did defeat Sterling 30-22 in a game where it took 3 hours, a little 206-mile distance, and all in due part to number 10, Jacob Dunning, the sophomore for Lamar. He was 13 for 23 for 228 yards, as well as 2 touchdowns and an interception. And a big shout out to the Lamar wide receivers, number 15, Cale Buxton, the senior, having 5 receptions for 112 yards, including a punt return touchdown that went 83 yards. Number 14, Alexander Williams, the junior, had 5 receptions for 89 yards and a touchdown. And number 11, Kaysen Pollard, the junior, having 3 receptions for 27 yards and a touchdown. Big win for Lamar as they went to Sterling's house and got the win. Arvada hosting Pueblo County, a 3A school, and it was not a good showing for them. Unfortunately, we don't have any stats for Arvada as they were shut out by Pueblo County 41-0. Big performance by Pueblo County's running backs Patrick Noga, Cohen Glenn, and Orlando Rodriguez, each of them having a touchdown. Patrick Noga with 3, Cohen Glenn with 2, and Orlando Rodriguez with just the 1. And also their defense put on a show, having 2 interceptions, and Johnny Mooring having 5 tackles, 2 of which were for a loss, including 1 sack. And that's really all that happened on Thursday, just 2 games involving 2A teams. So, moving on to Friday, the big day. Friday, September 6th. Let's start off with Berthoud at Moffat County. Berthoud having a tough loss last week, made a big-time comeback as they took out Moffat County 48-8, thanks in part to number 2, Skylar Stryken, the senior. He was 15 for 20 for 255 yards and 4 touchdowns. Number 6, Jaden Michaelis, the senior, having 4 receptions for 102 yards and 3 of those touchdowns. And I also got to give a shout out to the defensive performance out of Ethan Hoffmeister, number 24, having 8 tackles and 1.5 for a loss. Moffat County, though, they did give a good fight back. Shout out to number 1 running back Zachary Hedman, the senior, who had 16 carries for 100 yards and 1 touchdown. Moving on, Peyton was at Lincoln. Lincoln did not provide any stats, but Peyton surely did. However, since they are 1A, we won't go too much into that for this week. Lincoln destroyed by Peyton, and Peyton will be a top team in 1A, so it was very much expected. Lincoln falls 57-8. Mitchell at La Junta. Now, I got to tell you guys something about Mitchell. I'm not necessarily high on Mitchell. They just dropped down from 3A to 2A, and really that's where they definitely belong, is 2A, because La Junta definitely gave them a rude awakening, a welcoming even to 2A football, as they destroyed Mitchell 74-7. La Junta had 4 rushing touchdowns, in credit to number 2, Rylan Schmidt, the senior, who had 8 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown. Number 3, Zach Montoya, the senior, had 2 carries for 15 yards, but each of those carries resulted in a touchdown, so he had 2 touchdowns on the day. And number 4, Chris Barela, the junior, who had 4 carries for 26 yards and a touchdown. Some other La Junta touchdowns. Shout out Rylan Schmidt again on defense, who had an 8-yard fumble return touchdown. Number 7, Monzi Alvidrez, the senior, had a 50-yard pick 6, and number 11, DJ Brown, the senior, also had a pick 6 that went 16 yards. And I want to give an honorable mention to Luciano Jimenez, number 82, the junior, who also had an interception and a fumble recovery. So big defense, big offense, as La Junta took down Mitchell 74-7. Moving on, we got D'Evelyn at Conifer. Unfortunately, no stats for D'Evelyn as they faced the 3A opponent in Conifer. It was a tough matchup for them going to Conifer's house, but they lost 12-41. Up next, Steamboat Springs at Middle Park, another 3A versus 2A matchup, and resulting in a shutout. Middle Park coming off of that win against Estes Park last week. Unfortunately, we don't have stats from either team for this matchup, but it was a shutout as Steamboat Springs rolls over Middle Park 40-0. Moving on, we have Fort Lupton at Wellington. This is an interesting 2A matchup. Wellington, they're probably going to be one of the best teams in 2A, if not the best team in 2A, all thanks to Tanner Gray, the junior, quarterback and defensive end, number 4. He was 9 for 13 for 205 yards for 3 touchdowns, with a 91-yard pass being his longest pass of the day. He also had 3 sacks, 2 QB hurries, and 4 total tackles on the other side of the ball. Also, shout out to Kyle Kisner, number 3, the sophomore, who had 4 carries for 47 yards and 2 touchdowns, including the 1 reception for 20. Can't forget that. Number 5, Cash Allschwager, the senior, also had a solid performance. 3 receptions, all resulting in a touchdown for 126 yards. And Fort Lupton had a tough matchup, but I got to give a shout out to number 24, Jesse Soretto, the senior, who was responsible for the lone touchdown after having 3 receptions for 121 yards. He also had 6 carries for 22 yards. But Wellington defeats Fort Lupton 48-6. Moving on, Prospect Ridge at Manitou Springs. Manitou Springs coming off of a big win against Prospect Ridge. Manitou Springs just had that big win last week, and unfortunately Manitou Springs was unable to provide any stats as of this recording, but they did come away with the win against the 1A opponent 41-6. Moving on, Bayfield went down to New Mexico to take on the 4A opponent Aztec. And it was a solid performance by Bayfield, as it wasn't any issue traveling down across the southern border, especially for quarterback number 16, Cole McWhirter, the sophomore. He had 14 completions on 18 attempts for 355 yards and 4 touchdowns. Also got to give a shout out to Lincoln Williams, who had 2 carries for 23 yards and the lone rushing touchdown. Also going to give a bit of a shout out to number 1, Estevan Gonzalez out of Bayfield, who led the team in rushing yards with 7 carries and 65 rushing yards. Big day for Bayfield. And Lincoln Williams also picking up 4 receptions for 113 yards and a touchdown. Cole McWhirter did a good job. He spreading the ball out to different receivers, as Caden White, the junior, Tyler Harriman, the junior, and James Sandoval, the sophomore, each having a receiving touchdown, as Bayfield defeats Aztec 41-7. Moving on, Pagosa Springs at Centauri. This was a big-time matchup. Centauri is arguably one of the best teams in 1A football right now. Had a big game, coming off a big game against Meeker. Pagosa Springs are traveling to Centauri's house and just came up short, losing 20-21. It was a good game, good matchup. It was a good effort from Pagosa Springs, and big shout out to number 34, Colton Lucero, the junior, who led the team with yards, having 24 carries for 226 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also had 1 reception for 10 yards. And I also got to give a shout out to Jackson Shield, the senior, who had 2 receptions for 30 yards as well as 1 touchdown. Wasn't enough though, as Pagosa Springs falls short to Centauri 20-21. Moving on, Alameda at the Pinnacle, another 2A against 1A matchup, and it was an absolute shutout for Alameda, as Angel Arroyo, the senior, had 16 carries for 207 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was also 1 for 2 in terms of passing for 37 yards. 1 was a touchdown and 1 was an interception, but it didn't really matter for Alameda. They were able to get the shutout 42-0. And Angel Arroyo also putting it in on defense, 4 total tackles, 2 tackles of which were for loss, and I'm guessing both of those were the sacks that he also had, 2 sacks and a forced fumble. Really good job by Alameda shutting out the Pinnacle. Banning Lewis Academy at Alamosa. Alamosa coming off of a good win. They were the home team in this matchup. Banning Lewis trying to get back on track, but it wasn't going to happen in this game as Alamosa absolutely took down Banning Lewis Prep. Number 6, Dyson Woodward, the senior, 7 for 17 for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as 1 interception. But the running back room was loaded as Dyson Woodward also had 8 carries for 92 yards and a touchdown. Also going to give a shout out to number 9, Tony Grigo, the junior, who also had a touchdown. Number 23, Zane Zook, the senior, who had 12 carries for 120 yards for 1 touchdown. And then also AJ Baker, the junior, also getting 1 touchdown. A solid performance from Alamosa as they got the shutout win against Banning Lewis Academy, 51-0. Moving on, Gunnison, the newly 2A team, headed down to Delta. And Delta, coming off the close loss against 3A Palisade, and now get to take on Gunnison, and they put on a show in their home debut, taking down Gunnison 51-12. Shout out to some of Delta's top players. Number 21, Nay So, the senior, who had 11 carries for 181 yards and 3 touchdowns. Number 7, Ty Reed, their quarterback, the senior, was 8 for 15 for 114 yards and 1 touchdown, and on the ground had 7 carries for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns. And also shout out to number 6, Deacon Sheen, the junior, who had a 30-yard pick six. Delta beats Gunnison 51-12. Moving on, Brush at University. University had a pretty solid performance against the Beat Diggers at home, and it was all thanks to that run game. 4 rushing touchdowns from this team, led by number 44, Freddie Cano, the senior, who had 9 carries for 112 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also saw rushing touchdowns out of number 1, Max Davis, the sophomore, and number 11, Brevin Doss, the senior. And just a dominating performance by University as they took the win at home, 33-12. Moving on, Salida at Woodland Park. Salida having a really tough matchup going down to Woodland Park, and they were unfortunately coming up short, 31-7, after coming off of a 62-0 dominating performance against Lincoln. Woodland Park, with the help of Marquez Joseph Schoenberger, had 11 for 21 for 3 touchdowns and 90 yards. Also had 14 carries for 90 yards on the ground. Woodland Park beats Salida 31-7. Denver West at Englewood. It was a close, low-scoring matchup as Denver West was looking to get another win under their belt, and a good win at that. They improved their record to 2-0 against Englewood after defeating them 12-6. Coleridge at Cedar Edge. Cedar Edge, 1A team, looking to bounce back and prove themselves a little bit, but Coleridge was not having any of it. They were able to hold on and go into Cedar Edge's house and come out with a win, 47-28. Moving on, this is an interesting one. This is Res Christian hosting a varsity opponent on Max Preps, but from what I was able to gather, it looked like it was a game against a private Christian school from Palm Springs, Florida. Doesn't look like they wanted to get their name out there or count this under their name according to Max Preps, but Resurrection Christian was able to get the win, 61-30. Moving on, Weld Central hosting Valley. Now, we didn't get any stats for Weld Central, but they were coming off. Last week, they had their opponent, Bennett, forfeit against them, so this was their official debut. No real stats from them as of this recording, but Valley, tough performance. They only had 120 yards of total offense, but they did get 2 blocked field goals from the stats where we were able to gather, but wasn't enough as they fall short to Weld Central, 7-48. Basalt at Rifle. Basalt coming up the ranks. They're proving that they are still one of the top teams in 2A, and this performance definitely shows it as they went to Rifle and came away with the win. Taylor Hayes, the senior, number 3, had 4 receptions for 107 yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as 2 carries for 17 yards and a touchdown. And also got to give a shout out to number 27, Will Daniel, who had 17 carries for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. 3 interceptions from Basalt's defense, thanks to number 20, Trip Spung, the sophomore, number 22, Will Torallo, the junior, and also Will Daniel making a presence on defense with getting an interception himself. Basalt defeats Rifle 42-12. And that closes out the Friday games. Moving on to Saturday games, we have Forge Christian at the Academy. Forge Christian, also a top team in 1A, looking to go down to Westminster, and they came away with the win. Unfortunately, we did not get any stats from the Academy, but they were shut out 45-0 against Forge Christian. Moving on, Bennett at Kennedy. Kennedy being a 3A school. This was a good win for Bennett, especially coming off of last week when they forfeited against Weld Central. And based off of the information that I was able to gather from Bennett as someone who used to live out there, it sounded like there was a mix of players who were really, really sick, players that had family functions like funerals and weddings, and simply players that weren't ready. I'm honestly a little embarrassed by that. That's kind of not necessarily something that Bennett is known for, but they were able to get right back on track against a 3A team in Kennedy, and got a big time win. Unfortunately, we don't have stats for either team in this one, but Bennett did come away with the win, 42-16. Moving on, Strasburg at Montezuma Cortez. No stats from Montezuma Cortez, but Strasburg had a big game and were able to provide, with number 8, Aiden Dodge, the sophomore, having another top-tier game with 14 carries for 108 yards and 1 touchdown, as well as 1 reception for 6 yards and 1 touchdown. Also some solid performances from Cade Hemphill, number 3, the junior, who had 5 carries for 30 yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as 2 receptions for 60 yards. Number 4, Damian Garcia, the senior, had 8 carries for 61 yards and 1 touchdown, as well as 1 reception for 43 yards. And number 28, Cameron Manahan, making a presence on defense and of special teams, having 13 carries and 1 tackle for a loss, as well as a punt return touchdown. He had 3 total returns for 93 yards and 112 total kick return yards. So a solid performance from Strasburg as they went into Montezuma Cortez's house and came away with the win, 47-13. Moving on, the Classical Academy, a top team in 2A, went down to Florence and came away with a good win. Number 11, Drew Brown, the senior, was 9 for 17 for 185 yards and 3 touchdowns. And also a solid performance from number 16, Jackson Shipfer, the junior, who had 12 carries for 105 yards and 1 touchdown. Florence had a little bit of a fight to give, with number 7, Noah Howard, having 17 carries for 176 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tough day for him, though, in the office, as he only had 2 completions in 11 attempts for 41 yards and 1 interception. Tough loss for Florence, but a big win for the Classical Academy as they defeat Florence in Florence 45-15. And finally, Pueblo Central at Eaton. Unfortunately, was not able to get any stats for both teams as of this recording, but Pueblo Central had a lot to prove, and Eaton had a lot to come back from after a tough loss last week. But Pueblo Central was able to get the job done and get the win against Eaton, 32-7. And that does it for this recap for 2A football.
Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to this episode of the Playmakers Corner podcast. I am your host for this segment on the 3A recap here in episode 399, Gideon, and today, we are going to be talking about, well, the 3A recap. 3A had a very exciting weekend. I'm recording this starting at noon on Sunday, September 8th. So if you do not have stats in, too bad, so sad. I'm only going to report on the stats that I can directly observe. So, first of all, in this 3A recap, we're going to discuss our Thursday matchups, starting with Jefferson at Littleton. Yes, the Jefferson Saints are a 1A squad, But the Saints would come out on top of the Littleton Lions 36-12 in this game. We don't have very many stats yet. We only have Jefferson's side of this. But Demetrius Martinez ran for 265 yards in 19 carries. I dare say Littleton had a bit of a tough time stopping the run. Yeah, I dare say that is an accurate assessment. So, no stats for Littleton, but there we go. Next up, we have Greeley Central falling to Thompson Valley, 0-43. The Eagles come out on top, and there are no stats yet for Greeley Central, but what we do see is Greeley Central had 9 first downs to Thompson Valley's 15, and Greeley Central had 35 penalty yards to Thompson Valley's 15. For the Eagles, Garrett Hendrickson had 217 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, 13 for 15 on completions there. Hendrickson also had 35 rushing yards and a touchdown. Wes Bebo had 31 rush yards and a score. And then Joseph Arusha, 12 rushing yards and a touchdown as well. Touchdown as well from freshman Finley Lucas. Arusha had himself a day, 176 receiving yards as well with a score, as he was the leader there. Logan Belden also a receiving touchdown in this matchup. Then when we look at defense, Landry Suarez, Christian Chase, and Josiah Manu all with 8 tackles here. Ryan Case with 7, and CJ James with 4. For some reason, I'm not seeing Dane Gray on here, so we're going to have to keep an eye on him. But in terms of sacks, James did have 1, and then Arusha would have a pick in this game as well. I know this is against Greeley Central, but Arusha with stats worthy of a Playmaker of the Week consideration. We're going to have to keep an eye on that. James would force a fumble, which Seth Castle would recover. And then all around, good game here from Thompson Valley. Eli Metzger, by the way, the kicker, 5 for 5 on PATs in this game. Next up, though, we have Pueblo County defeating the Arvada Bulldogs 41-0. County, all those points coming in the first half. Cohen Glenn, 4 for 5 for 55 yards, but that one incompletion was a pick. Patrick Noga, 218 rushing yards for 3 touchdowns. Brody Harrison with 55 rushing yards. Glenn with 2 rushing touchdowns, and Rodriguez with 1. Rodriguez also had 39 receiving yards. And then Elijah Horton, the leader for tackles, with 9. Jacob Gonzalez with 6. Johnny Mooring with 5, 2 for loss. Mooring also had a sack in this game. Gonzalez and Glenn would each have a pick, while Gonzalez would have 2 pass deflections in this matchup. And then Jacob Gonzalez, 5 for 6 on PATs as well. Next up, we have Harrison taking down the George Washington Patriots 30-18. The Panthers, pretty good game here. You have Elio Hamanimana. He had 8 for 12 with passing, 134 pass yards, a touchdown to a pick. Josiah Evans with 82 rushing yards. Philip Pogue with 77 and 2 touchdowns. Receiving-wise, Darian Marion with 109 was the leader, along of 57 there. Next up, you have Genoa Brown with 14 tackles, 3 for loss. Josiah Evans with 10, Ralston Johnson with 7, Martinez and Gulong Craft with 6 apiece. Next up, Pogue and Brown each had a sack in this matchup, while Hamanimana had a pick for 12 yards. Good punting from Hamanimana, an all-around good game here in order to take down a 4A opponent for the 3A Harrison Panthers. Next up, we have Lutheran defeating Fort Morgan 56-20. Great game here from Eli Abramson of Lutheran. Fort Morgan, by the way, no stats yet, but 20 for 35 passing for Abramson for 360 yards. 4 touchdowns to 3 picks, though. Sawyer Wald, 12 carries for 3 touchdowns and 213 yards. Evan Holdridge as well with a touchdown. Mr. Vandershow, 7 receptions for 173 yards and 3 touchdowns. Evan Mackay for 69 receiving yards and a touchdown as well. In terms of defense, the leader for the Lions was Evan Holdridge with 10 tackles, 3 for loss. Xavier Villarreal with 9 for 2 and 2 for loss. Nick Tierlink and Evan Mackay as well, 8 tackles. Gavin Downing and Nicholas Park with 6, and Caden Tisdall with 5. Next up, in terms of sacks, there were 3 of them. 1 from Evan Holdridge, 1 from Park, and 1 from Tisdall. And then you have Mackay, who also had an interception in this game. All around, a great game here from the contending Lehigh Lions. Max Williams, 8 for 8 on PATs, so you know you got a reliable kicker there. Yeah, just all around, great game here from Lutheran against the Fort Morgan Mustangs. Then we have Wheat Ridge defeating Stanley Lake 47-28. Isaac McCune, 273 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks, 14 for 18 passing. Then you have Van Leyen, 75 rushing yards. Isaac McCune, 59 rushing yards and a score. Receiving, Bennett Wilkes, 7 catches for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then Grachowski with 34 receiving yards and a touchdown. No defense or special teams stats really for Wheat Ridge yet. But for Stanley Lake, we do have the stats for them. Boston Harris, 6 for 13 for 65 yards, 2 touchdowns to 3 picks. Liam Graham was held to only 37 yards and was the leader for this team. Evan Seifert, 21 yards and a touchdown, but surprising that Graham was held to 37 yards. Receiving, Brandon Collier was the leader, 40 yards for 2 touchdowns in 3 catches. On defense, though, Cameron Logan, 10 tackles, and Seifert with 8. Liam Graham had 7 himself. Graham also had a deflection, and Mr. Arendo had a blocked field goal in this game. So pretty solid here for Stanley Lake, but Wheat Ridge came out on top in this one. Next up, we have Palmer defeating the Sierra Stallions 58-12. I know it's Palmer, but it's still really, really good. You have Mason Aerosmith, 11 for 14 for 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. He also had 140 yards on the ground with 3 touchdowns. Dyson Sharpton, 74 yards and a touchdown there. By the way, Dyson, heck of a baseball player. I saw him hit a grand slam last year. Very, very good player. Receiving, Kamani Dotson, 63 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Damasio Garcia, 53 yards there. On defense, the leader, Kamani Dotson, 7 tackles with Dyson Sharpton meeting that. Sharpton also had a sack in this matchup, while Dotson had a pick and a fumble recovery. It was either caused by Mr. Kianadekian or by Sharpton. All around, very, very good game here by Palmer. But for Sierra, Chance Zamora, 4 for 10 for 63 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Jerome Barnes with 37 rush yards. Mr. Robinson Jr., 47 receiving yards, but that's on 1 catch. And then really tackle-wise, Mr. Valenzuela was the main standout with 14, and Dante Johnson, the sophomore, with 6. Nathan Sweet had 2 sacks on the day, and then Mr. Corday Zamora, the sophomore, had an interception, while Larry Sims and Valenzuela each caused a fumble. Valenzuela recovered one as well. Oh, well, Mr. Dent recovered one. Excuse my misspeaking there. That is all for Thursday games. On Friday, we had Evergreen taking down the Montbello Warriors 47-27. Evergreen, Josh Bittner, 4 for 6 passing for 57 yards. Avery Zuski, though, threw 1 touchdown for 10 yards on 1 pass attempt. Grady White was the rushing leader, 110 rushing yards and a score. Jace Jody with 76 yards and a touchdown. Mr. Quasney, Anthony, 67 yards and a score. And then Bittner, 29 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, the leading receiver was Jody with 33 yards. And then on defense, Cademan Haddad and Jace Jody led the way with 6 tackles, and Jackson Post had 5 total. Jody and Quasney shared half a sack there, and then Quasney forced and recovered a fumble in this matchup. There are no stats for Montbello yet, but very good game here by the Evergreen Cougars. Next up, Eagle Valley would fall to the Canyon City Tigers, 35-49. We don't have stats for Eagle Valley yet, but Canyon City, we have Trey Schumacher passing for 59 yards, but throwing an interception to no touchdowns. Gavin Reddick, 99 rushing yards and a score. Trey Schumacher, 54 and 2 touchdowns. Matthew Harms, 83 rushing yards and a score. And then Jake Adamich, 59 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Receiving, Matthew Harms was the leader with 33 yards, but in only 2 catches. And then on defense, the leader of this pack was Adamich with 7, William Basham with 7 as well, Harms with 6, and Caden Benson with 5. Cody Varner had a sack, and then there were 2 players with an interception, Benson and Harms. Harms looks like was a pick 6. He also had 5 pass deflections, and Benson had 6 himself. Noah Berkdahl, 307 kickoff yards, but also was the punter in this one. All around, very, very good game here from Canyon City to take down the Eagle Valley Devils. Next up, Lewis Palmer versus Coronado. Lewis Palmer would win this one 39-14 against the 4A squad. No stats for Lewis Palmer yet, though. Coronado is the only other 2 that has stats in. Next up, Cheyenne Mountain defeated the Pueblo Centennial Bulldogs 55-11. Again, Pueblo Centennial, no stats in this game, but honestly, this was a little bit expected. Sorry, Pueblo Centennial fans, but this team is not what you would call the peak of Colorado's powers. But 55-11 for Cheyenne Mountain over Pueblo Centennial. Next up, we have the Skyview Wolverines beating the Hinckley Thunder. Skyview would win 50-0. There are no stats up yet, but on the this is just sad. I know I'm saying this in a happy voice, but Hinckley has not won a game since October of 2019. We are closing in on 5 straight years without Hinckley winning a game. I have opinions on that, but now is not the time. Next up, though, we have Basalt defeating the Rifle Bears 42-12. The Longhorns coming out on top in this one. Tristan Sheets, 7 for 18 for 85 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. Isaac Valencia 0 for 1 passing with 1 pick. Not really a highlight stat. I always just kind of find those a little bit funny. Devin Sanchez, 60 yards rushing. Valencia, 50 yards rushing and a touchdown. Receiving, Ryland Lane was the leader with 1 touchdown there. 59 receiving yards, but a long of 61, so must have had a catch for a loss of 2. On defense, Arath Lopez, 16 tackles, 11 solo. Mr. Montellano, 8 tackles. Ryland Lane with 7. Lane with 8. Flores and Valencia with 7. Sheets with 6. And Robert Magnuson with 5. Interceptions. Magnuson had a pick along with Mr. Flores. Lopez and Sheets each had, Lopez forced a fumble, which was recovered by Sheets. And then Dante Rios, by the way, I want to highlight this fella, 59 kick return yards in this matchup against the Basalt Longhorns. So very, very good game there for him, but ultimately a loss for the Rifle Bears. Next up, Pueblo South would defeat the Falcons 35-21. Falcon are a 4A squad, so Pueblo South good bounce back game from that loss last week against Meade. Caden Herrera, 16 for 23 for 223 passing yards, 2 touchdowns to 2 picks. Chase Hurley, 88 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Jake Pashada, 89 receiving yards and a score. Landon Cordova, 65 yards catching. And then Damian Cordova, 33 yards and a touchdown. Tackle-wise, Chase Hurley was the leader with 5 and 2 for loss. Jordan Trujillo would have a pick in this game. Landon Cordova would have a forced fumble and a recovery. And then Armand Real would have 1 fumble recovery for 45 yards. Kickoff-wise, the man was Jaden Saint, 6 kicks for 291 yards. And then Martinez, 5 for 5 on PATs in this game for the Pueblo South Colts. Very, very good game here by South. Next up, Roosevelt. The Rough Riders would top the Holy Family Tigers 38-21. This is a game that I really wish that I had stats for, but ultimately all we have are the recap videos and the score tracker. But looking at it, Holy Family, they went up in the first 7-3 and then had to fight off a comeback here from Roosevelt. Holy Family would be down 17-14 at the half. Then Roosevelt would make that a even wider margin. That would be 24-14 in the third. Holy Family would score again in the fourth, but Roosevelt would score twice more in the fourth quarter, making it 38-21 in this game. It looks like the quarterback for Roosevelt in this game was Josiah Ramirez, and Noah Lucero has been having himself a season from what it looks like. And then Milo Pascal also had a couple of touchdowns here in this game, along with a pick 6 here against Holy Family. So Milo Pascal, that makes him a contender for Playmaker of the Week here for this performance over Holy Family. Next up, we have Dakota Ridge defeating former number 1 Green Mountain, at least on my list, number 1 Green Mountain, 37-20. The Rams have not input stats yet, but honestly, this sounds like it was a really fun game, and I wish I were there. But again, no stats for Green Mountain as of yet. Dakota Ridge won 37-20. Next up, Pomona in a close loss against Pueblo West. The Panthers only losing this one 17-21. Honestly, a concerning win for Pueblo West. You do not want to see this kind of margin of victory against a team like Pomona. And this honestly shows some weakness for Pueblo West against the run, because Pomona doesn't exactly have a great pass game. And so this is concerning for Pueblo West. Next up, though, we have Steamboat Springs, the Sailors, defeating the 2A Middle Park Panthers 40-0. No stats for this one yet, but in terms of the video recap that they have uploaded to Max Preps, it looks like Tanner Cobb has a heck of an arm, and he was airing that thing out. Now, the only thing about Steamboat that concerns me that I'm going to have to see before they're ranked is that they really haven't, outside of Moffat County, haven't really played anybody yet. Aspen is going to be good to watch. The real measurement for Steamboat is going to be that game against Palisade, and then also the one against Glenwood Springs. That league schedule is going to be very interesting to watch, but I think the Sailors have a chance to win. Next up, though, Mountain View would fall to Loveland 12-15. I did call it on my preview that this game would be closer than a lot of people would expect. Mountain View would score 12 points in the first half, hold Loveland to only a touchdown in the first quarter, but then a touchdown and conversion in the third would lead to the loss here for the Mountain Lions. But Cam Frost, 9 for 18 for 152 yards and two interceptions. Keegan Amons, 66 rushing yards. Frost with 11 rush yards and a touchdown, and then Casey Mendoza, 7 yards and a score. Tyson Mayers-Benz was the leader, 1 catch for 47 receiving yards, and then Amons with 46 receiving yards. There are no defensive stats yet, but all around, good effort here from Mountain View, taking down, or not taking down, but almost taking down a Titan in 4A in the Loveland Red Wolves. Next up, Centaurus would defeat Niwot 49-7. The Warriors coming out on top. There are no stats for this one yet, but ultimately there's not too much to evaluate here. Niwot lost pretty handily. Next up, Severance would defeat Timnath 27-7. Started out pretty close, but Severance just pulled away here in the second half. It was 13-7 at halftime in Severance's favor. Pretty good game here from the Silver Knights. Ultimately, pretty solid, but yeah, it started off with a pick six by Severance by Caden Reyna, and then it just really Ben Kane passed down to Carter Gaines for the touchdown, but ultimately that was all she wrote after that, after Kaysen Falsetti would get a touchdown for the Silver Knights. So that's all for that game. Next up, though, Conifer. The Lobos would defeat the Dublin Jaguars 41-12. The Lobos, Benson White, 14 for 23 for 190 yards and 4 touchdowns to no picks. Karsten Polanski, 73 rushing yards in this game. Mason Murphy, 62 receiving yards. Solomon Washer with 54. On defense, the leader in tackles was Max Bardaje. And then sack-wise, Mr. Plomidon, he had 1 sack. And then Miles Newth would force and recover a fumble. Khalil Jones would force one. And then Austin Cook would likely be the recoverer on that. So those are all the stats we have here for Conifer in this win against Devlin. Very weird final here for Devlin. You see 12 and you think that's 2 touchdowns, but no. In the fourth quarter, they got presumably a field goal and a safety because there were 5 points scored in the fourth quarter. Next up, Palisade, just back-to-back. After that big win over Delta last week, matched up with a 4A top 5 opponent in Montrose and would fall 35-14 in this game. All 14 of those in the fourth quarter here. If Palisade hadn't allowed 21 points in the first quarter, it would have been closer. But for the Bulldogs, Mr. Springer, 2 for 2 passing for 26 yards. Carter Hayward, the sophomore, 64 rushing yards. Caleb Johnson had 10 rushing yards and a touchdown, and then Springer also had a touchdown on the ground. In terms of tackles, Michael Kemmis, 12 tackles with 1 for loss. Kedon Everett with 11 with 2 for loss. Hayward and Dylan Larson each had 9. Caleb Reed had 8. Easton Embry had 7. Vincent Johnston had 6. And then Mr. Sam Chacon had 5. And really that's all she wrote. Carter Hayward did a pretty good job in the special teams department, but Palisade just didn't have it in them to take down the Montrose Red Hawks. Next up, Meade, to close out Friday, would defeat Frederick, the Golden Eagles, 16-14. Unfortunately, we do not have stats for Meade. This is one where I would consider one of the winning players for Playmaker of the Week, but looking at the score tracker, Meade started out with a touchdown in the first quarter. Frederick would score 14 points in the second to only a field goal from the Mavericks. So Frederick would lead 14-10 at half, and then in the third quarter, Meade would score a touchdown to make it a win for the Mavericks. Very gritty, very good, very defense-heavy win here for Meade in this one. Now for the Saturday game, starting off with Northridge versus Glenwood Springs. The Demons of Glenwood would defeat the Northridge Grizzlies 44-29. No stats for this one yet, but what we do know about this game is that Northridge actually led in the first quarter 7-0, and then Glenwood Springs would score 13 points to Northridge's 6 to make it 13 all, and then Glenwood 19 unanswered points in the third quarter, and then 12 in the fourth. Northridge would score 16 points in the fourth quarter, but all in all, that third quarter was the differentiator here for Glenwood Springs, trying to push for a playoff spot here and trying to recover their RPI after that opening loss to Elizabeth. Next up, though, we have the Kennedy Commanders losing to the Bennett Tigers 42-16. No stats in this one yet, but I can't rightfully say that I am surprised. Next up, though, Pueblo Central, the Wildcats, would go to Eaton and defeat the Reds 32-7. That front seven for Pueblo Central was just too much for Eaton to handle in this game. Next up, though, Pueblo East would be defeated by the Discovery Canyon Thunder 32-14. No stats for this one yet, but all around good game here for Discovery Canyon to defeat a league, well, not a league, but a local rival who they had some trouble against last year. And then finally, Windsor would defeat the Longmont Trojans pretty handily, 34-9 in this Saturday contest. 10 points each in the first and the second for Windsor, and then Longmont would get a field goal in the third as the lone score of that period. Windsor would score 14 points in the fourth quarter, though, to Longmont's 6 to come out on top. No stats here for Windsor, but for Longmont, quick divulgence. I had no idea there was a second Foot brother, so that's going to be something to look out for. But ultimately, that is our 3A recap. Very, very good week here for the classification. Very fun week all around. A lot of good contenders for Playmaker of the Week. I'm going to have a lot of thinking to do about who I choose, but I will, well, you all will find that out here soon. So, ultimately, this may be the last time you hear from me today, but stay safe, stay hydrated, and make sure that you are getting all of your vegetables for the week. And this has been Gideon, and you're listening to Playmakers Corner. Peace.
Coach V here, and I'm here to go ahead and recap the Rampart versus Ponderosa game. Week 2, September 6th here. Going into this game, I really felt like both teams wanted this win here. Ponderosa coming off of a really tough loss to Palmer Ridge. On the other hand, Rampart just barely squeaking by Lewis Palmer, and so a win here would do wonders for both squads' confidence moving forward. And so let's go ahead and hop into it. In the first quarter, Rampart, they start with the ball here, and they are rolling with a pretty heavy dose of the senior running back Camden Bruns, who goes ahead and takes 2 handoffs up the middle, one for a first down, one for 8, the next for 7, and then they get a first down. Then they go ahead and call an end around left to Khalid El-Wazir for 2. And then the quarterback, Damian Deach, he goes ahead and throws a nice little post route to number 6 here. That's James Royer. That goes for a pretty nice gain. That actually puts them on the 26 with a first down. Approaching the red zone, by the way. They go ahead and hand it off to Bruns twice, one for 2, the next for 5, both up the middle. That sets up basically a 3rd and 3 here. And then it's worth noting at the 9:04 mark after 3rd or 2nd down, Ryan Tongren, the big defensive end for Ponderosa, would be helped off the field and would not return for this game. If he is hurt beyond this game, that would be a big blow to Pondo moving forward here. But After that, Elwazier, he runs left, but he is gang tackled. So that brings up 4th and 3 here. But before they could go for it, there's a false start. So now it's 4th and 8. But Rampart, wanting to be aggressive, they decide to go for it. So here we go. Damian Deach, the junior quarterback, he goes ahead, gets the snap out of shotgun, and then throws a corner route, a dot to the right side to James Royer, who walks it in, winning his man-on-man matchup to make it 6-0, 7-0 after the PAT on a nice 24-yard touchdown to make it 7-0 with 7:48 left here as Ponderosa takes over after that to get going. And actually, Pondo, they get a 1st and 5 on the 44 here, a nice return, and also a penalty tagged on to this, so pretty prime yardage here. And so here we go. Ponderosa looking to tie this one up here down early. They go ahead and hand it off right to Ethan Pekarik. He gets a nice 2-yard gain. Then they hand it off right again to Pekarik. He gets a 1st down on the same play. On 1st down here, Marcus Price in at quarterback. He drops back looking to throw, but he is sacked by Caleb Silvig and Justice Derrickson here. That brings up 2nd and long. They then hand it off left. Couldn't see who it was to, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't go anywhere. So now it's at least 3rd and 15, maybe a little bit longer here. And so Pondo calls a timeout at 5:30 to talk about it. Out of the timeout, 3rd and long here. Marcus Price gets a snap, and he throws one deep, and I mean deep, down the right sideline, and it is caught actually pretty much right in front of me by number 4, the senior Cole Barnes here, who almost scores but is just dragged down by a Rampart corner. A perfect throw on this one to not only give them the 1st down, but basically put them right up on the goal line. They hand it off to number 7, that's Troy McWhorter here, who gets about 2 yards, setting up 2nd and 2, and then they hand it off to number 47, that's De Al Capone Veazey, and hopefully I'm saying that right, so excuse me if I'm saying that wrong here, but the senior running back punches it in, and then the PAT is also good to tie this one at 7-7 with 4:39 left. Now Rampart, they're looking to get back on the board here and retake the lead. After a nice dive to Bruns for 7, they throw a quick screen here to number 0, that's senior Carter Leffler, who goes ahead and gets the 1st down basically on the 50 at midfield. Then they run an outside zone play right to Bruns. He gets another 8. And then another dive to Bruns. He would get the 1st down. Now on 1st down here, they would run it again, but Ethan Pekarik gets a nice tackle for loss, setting up 2nd and 13 here. Deach here, he gets a snap on 2nd down, tries to go deep again, but it is just off the mark. Would have had, I think he had him open, but it was just off the mark, overthrown. So now it's 3rd down. And then on 3rd down here, Deach under pressure just makes a bad decision and throws it. And Ethan Pekarik gets the interception here, setting up this next Pondo drive and ending that Rampart drive. They have it with 1:35 left on the 45. And so Ponderosa trying to get something going. They basically run all run plays. The first one is an inside zone to Pekarik for 1 yard. Then they toss it right here. I believe that is to number 7, who is Troy McWhorter, who gets a couple more. I think he gets 6 or 5 on this one, so now it's 3rd and 4. Then Marcus Price, he gets a snap looking to throw, but he goes left and scrambles for no gain. Cam Bruns on the tackle there, so now it's 4th and 4. Rampart, they go 3 and out. Pondo goes 3 and out. Rampart forcing that as they get the ball back with 34.2 seconds left. They'll get a 1st down on a handoff to Bruns, and then another handoff to Bruns for 3 yards. So that sets up a 2nd and 7 here at the top of the 2nd quarter on the 15 for Rampart here. But on this drive, not too much more would happen. A deep sack taken by Deach here of Rampart would go ahead and basically kill this drive here, just short of a safety. Almost sacked there for a safety, and so they'll punt it going 3 and out. Pondo, they would then get the ball here, and they would sub in their sophomore quarterback, Coulter Espinosa, which I thought was very interesting here. But It would start off with a handoff to VZ to go ahead and give them a first down on a nice 17-yard run, a strong run here. They would then continue to feed him, who would get another nice run up the middle for another first down here, putting them on the 12. Following that, they would toss it left, but he would only get 2, met by Justice Derrickson. They would then hand it off to him right up the middle. He would get 4, setting up 3rd and 4. And then on 3rd and 4, Coulter Espinosa gets the snap, and he just basically runs QB power, going to the left side, beating the defense to the edge, and going to the house to make it 14-7 as Ponderosa retakes the lead with 8:34 left here in the second quarter. Now, Rampart, they take over here, trying to run the ball, but it's just not working out here. First down would start with a big gang tackle going left, and almost a fumble recovered by them, but Rampart gets it. So now it's 2nd and 12. Then on 2nd and 12, they throw it, but number 18 for them, Riker Thompson, makes a very nice pass deflection, setting up 3rd down. They then hand it off to Bruns right, but he doesn't get enough here, only 8. So now it's 4th and 4. They go 3 and out once more. Pondo, they get the ball here, but not much goes for them either, as they are also trying to run the ball, trying to give it to McCorder, but he is stopped for a 1-yard gain, and then stopped for like a 3-yard loss, led by Justice Derrickson. And then Price, who's now back in, tries to scramble, but gets only 4 yards, and so that sets up 4th and 7, and they go 3 and out as well. Now, Rampart, they take over on the 25 here. They will get a pretty big first down thanks to an end around to number 4 Khalid El-Wazir, who would put them on the 39. And then on first down, Deech would go deep, and it's on the money this time, but it is dropped, so that sets up 2nd and 10. On 2nd down, they hand it off to Bruns. He only gets 2 yards, setting up a long 3rd and 8, it feels. And on 3rd and 8, Deech throws it, but he gets hammered as he throws. Luckily, it's just an incompletion, and so they are once more forced to punt it. Not a 3 and out, as they did get a first down, but a very early punt here on this drive. And so Pondo, they take over. Espinosa now back in at quarterback. He runs the power right here, goes for 5 yards. They then hand it up to VZ up the middle. He gets a nice gain, setting up 1st and 10 on the 47. They then throw a quick screen right to make it 2nd and 5 before another VZ run up the middle here, where he breaks some ankles before powering forward to make it 1st and 10 on the 23. They continue to feed VZ here, who makes some nice cuts on this next play, making it 2nd and 4 on a 6-yard gain. Then Pondo takes their second timeout here with 1:18 left. Out of the timeout, they run it to VZ once more. It's a loss. And then Espinosa, he keeps it going right, but that's another loss for 2. So now it's 4th and 7 here. Rampart calls their second timeout at 39.7 seconds left, and Pondo attempts his kick from the 20, and he would nail it through, giving them the 17-7 lead. And that would basically be the end of the first half. Rampart trailing here in this one, while Pondo has a pretty good lead. Now, I'm just going to be honest, the rest of this third quarter, pretty much nothing happens. Ponderosa, they keep Coulter Espinosa in, which I think is very interesting, but they pretty much just exclusively run the ball between Espinosa, VZ, and McCorder here. It looks like just trying to use up the clock. Max Mervin gets a couple end arounds, but doesn't really go anywhere here. They do get into the red zone at some point, but on 3rd and 5, Espinosa, he tries to throw it. It's an incomplete pass. He would have had Mervin on the sideline, but it just wasn't a great pass there. And so they try a swing pass to Mervin on 4th, but this Rampart defense, they sniff that out and they stop that. That's a turnover on downs. By the time Rampart gets the ball here, it's pretty much halfway through those third quarter, 5:34 left. But this Rampart offense just going ice cold. They go 3 and out here, trying to run the ball, nothing working. So Pondo takes over on the 45 with 3:44 left, continuing to run the ball here. And that's what they continue to do. Let's go ahead and skip into the fourth quarter. Let's skip through this game just a little bit faster here. In the fourth quarter, Rampart, they would eventually get the ball back here, but not too much would go for them. They would get a couple handoffs, get some first downs here, but eventually they would find themselves in a 4th and 18, a tough sitch that Pondo puts them in. And here's what happens. They go ahead and try to punt it, but this punt, it's kind of just dropped. It's a little high, but the punter drops it. Then he tries to fall on it, but he completely misses it. And so number 26 of Ponderosa, Bryson Tidwell, scoops this up and returns it to the house to put Pondo up 24-7 at the 7:26 mark. And that's pretty much the game there. I don't really want to talk about this one too much more. Rampart would score a garbage time touchdown that didn't mean anything to go ahead and make it 24-14. That is your final score here in this one, which was kind of a quieter game, I feel like. Let me talk about some stats for Rampart because they are the only ones who have it in as of today, September 8th. But Damian Deach, 7 of 15, 103 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Cam Bruns, 18 carries, 106 yards, a touchdown. Khalid El-Wazir, 11 carries for 53 yards. Deach with 4 for -26. I think they're counting sacks there. As far as receiving goes, James Royer, 2 receptions, 53 yards and a touchdown. Carter Leffler, 3 for 33 and a touchdown there. And then on defense, we have Cam Bruns with 13 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, leading the team. Nathan Boylston with a sack, Caleb Silvig with a sack. Bruns also had a fumble recovery in this one. But altogether, Ponderosa is in an interesting situation. I don't know if Marcus Price was hurt. I don't believe I saw him get hurt this game. I just think they went with Espinosa here because, he could run the ball. So it looks like that they are using him as more of their running quarterback in that role. And then Price is maybe more of their pocket passer. But it did not look super efficient last game, I guess, or in this game. So we'll see what happens. I don't think there's a quarterback controversy, but definitely something to keep an eye on. Ponderosa, like I said, became very conservative in the second half. Once they got that 10-point lead, they basically just ran the ball and threw short passes. You did not see another pass over 10 yards, I'm pretty sure, as in the receiver running a route past 10 yards at all after that first deep throw by Price. So there is that, and that makes things interesting there. The defense, they played the run well. I thought they did a good job coverage-wise. They were pretty solid there as well. So there you go there. Good win for them to get in the winning column here in their 2024 campaign. For Rampart, they had their opportunities. Their offense just went ice cold here. Outside of Bruns, El-Wazir was making some plays, but they could only really run the ball here. They went away from passing very early after a couple incompletions, and I think that just put their quarterback in a tough spot here. So we'll see what happens moving forward. But like I said, final score in this one, Ponderosa beats Rampart 24-14.
Obviously, you want a trainer who can make you stronger and faster with the work you put in, but what about a trainer who can help you rehab and recover like the pros? Look no further than Junkyard Training, that not only offers specific strength and speed training, but also offers a plethora of recovery and rehab techniques like cryo, cupping, recovery boots, and so much more. Learn more today by visiting junkyardtraining.net or call 303-521-7594. Once again, visit junkyardtraining.net or call 303-521-7594 and get started today.
What's good, y'all? Here, Coach V with your Week 2 Colorado High School boys football for a recap. We have a couple games here, so let's go ahead and talk about them. Games that we were not able to attend, that is. I know there's only one 4A game we went to. That was Ponderosa Rampart. Make sure you check out that recap. But, let's go ahead and start with Thursday, September 5th here. Thomas Jefferson playing Mountain Range. They go ahead and take that one in a 31-22 win. Nick Ratty with 4 touchdown passes, I believe, to hold off Mountain Range, who was kind of keeping it close. close. Throughout the game, Thomas Jefferson got to a fast start here, and Mountain Range was trying to play catch-up, but they were able to take them down. Moving on here, Liberty would go ahead and blow out Widefield 36-6, a big game for Liberty here as they get their first win of the season. Then we have Highlands Ranch as they take care of business against Aurora Central 42-0. Crew Garrick, the senior quarterback, 6 of 7, 193 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown in a great effort. Luke Backen, the senior running back, 8 carries for 105 yards and a touchdown in that Highlands Ranch win. Palmer Ridge then takes care of business against Doherty 42-0. Carson Campbell, the senior quarterback, passed a bit more this game here. 11 of 17, 179 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Also had 60 rushing yards on 7 carries and a rushing touchdown. Very efficient there against Doherty. Jackson Maybach, running back, continuing to make some noise here. 9 for 69 and 2 rushing touchdowns there. And then their lead receiver was Zach Chrysler, 5 receptions, 98 yards and a touchdown, as Palmer Ridge remains undefeated. Then we had a classic here, Bear Creek versus Skyline. This game would go in overtime where Bear Creek would win 35-34. So it was 28-28 going into overtime. Both teams did score an OT, but Skyline in the end would go for 2, trying to go for the win, and would not get it. In OT, though, for Bear Creek, Dylan Thomas would get a 15-yard rushing touchdown to put them on the board, and then eventually give them a PAT, as Bear Creek wins a tough one against Skyline, who is fighting here with what they have, but just coming up short. Here's some stats here for Bear Creek. Riley Wilson, 11 of 19, 137 yards, 1 passing touchdowns, 83 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Jojo Hernandez, I believe 17 carries for 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kamari May at receiver, by the way, 2 receptions, 33 yards, and a touchdown there. For Skyline, Servando Morales, the junior quarterback, 5 of 15 for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns to 2 picks, but also had 15 carries for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns. Miley Davis, the junior wide receiver, 3 receptions for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns, as Skyline came close to a potential upset, but could not pull it off in the end. And then to wrap up Thursday here, 3A Harrison would take care of George Washington 30-18 in what is a little bit of an upset there. Harrison with a big win over G-Dub in this game. So that'll wrap up the Thursday games. Let's move to Friday, September 6th. Golden falls to 5A Bryden 21-9. Thatcher Matthews of Golden, the sophomore quarterback, 11 of 20, 116 passing yards, had 27 carries for 122 yards, but obviously was not enough there. 4A Silver Creek falls to 5A Boulder, surprisingly, 28-14 here. Montbello still looking for their first win, falls to 3A Evergreen 47-27. Frederick also falls to a 3A team in Meade, this time 16-14 in a close one. Gavin Ishmael, 16 of 25 for 149 passing yards and a passing touchdown. Sonny Del Pizzo at wide receiver was their lead guy at 3 receptions for 48 and 1. I mean, this team, Frederick, was trying to run the ball against Meade, but Meade, they have a very good front 7. I believe Frederick just found themselves in a tough spot, under 20 yards, 30 yards rushing for them, which is very low. Then we have Falcon falling to 3A Pueblo South as well, 35-21 in a competitive one there. Denver North, though, they would go ahead and beat Adams City 31-6. Mesa Ridge surviving a scare apparently against Northfield 50-47. That is, I'm recording this on September 8th, 2024. I've been waiting for that score to update, but I guess it's true. So there you go. No stats as of right now, but hopefully we'll get some tomorrow on Monday. But a pretty crazy shootout here. Mesa Ridge currently ranked number 1 in our power rankings, while Northfield is not. So that would have really shaken up some things, but a win is a win there. Speaking of shaking up some things, Pueblo West survives a scare versus 3A Pomona, winning 21-17. West was down actually until the fourth quarter, where a rushing touchdown with 11 minutes left would give them the 21-17 lead. And then for the rest of that quarter, the defense would step up and stop Pomona here. So Pueblo West surviving a scare here. Gavin Lockett only 2 of 6 for 48 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Not a lot of passing yards there, which is interesting. 159 rushing yards, though, and 2 rushing touchdowns on 17 carries. Zach Duran, 5 carries for 81 yards. Brock Keck, the only receiver who got anything, 2 receptions for 48 yards and a touchdown. As Pueblo West continues to show their commitment to the run, and it almost bit them here against Pomona. So there you go there, but they stay undefeated. Moving on, Sand Creek beats Air Academy 40-27, a big win for them. Ethan Mangrum, the former Falcon player, got the start at quarterback here. I don't think any other quarterback got a start, and he went 9 of 12 for 145 yards, 1 interception, but also had 24 carries for 171 yards and 3 touchdowns. The hat trick there. Achilles Evan, the other running back, or the running back for Sand Creek, he had 23 carries for 222 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's actually pretty big time there. And then Elijah Brothers on defense, 7 tackles, 2 picks. Unfortunately, not a lot of touches on offense here, as they are not passing the ball as much. Maybe it's because Mangrum is in at quarterback and they're still adjusting. We'll see what happens there. But Sand Creek with a big win over Air Academy here to get going. Riverdale Ridge would then blow out Pooter 28-0. Montrose takes care of 3A Palisade 35-14 as expected. Dakota Ridge outlasts 3A Green Mountain 37-20 in an emotional win. I know they've been going through some stuff over there. So a good win for Dakota Ridge to get here. Kellen Bayronson at quarterback, 11 of 19 for 106 passing yards, 2 picks, 26 rushing yards. Landon Kausbeck leading the team with 16 carries for 118. Sam Callis right behind him, though, with 12 for 52 as they take care of a tough Green Mountain team, 37-20. Moving on here, Cheyenne Mountain, they blow out Pueblo Centennial, 55-11. 18 different carries. Or 18 carries from 8 different players, I should say. They went for 268 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. Cade Vinson, 1 rush for 61 yards that went for a touchdown. Donovan Rojas, 3 for 58 rushing yards and a touchdown. Zach Robinson, 5 carries for 50 yards and a touchdown. And then Tyler Chris, 1 carry for 41 yards and a touchdown as they take care of Pueblo Centennial. Moving on here, Grand Junction takes on rival Grand Junction Central. And for the first time since 2020, Grand Junction wins 35-14 here. A big time rivalry win for Grand Junction as they win this matchup for the first time since we've started doing this podcast here in a big time game, and they're also undefeated right now. Will Applegate, the quarterback, 3 of 6 for 26 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, also had 13 carries for 62 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, and then had 3 tackles and a pass deflection on defense here as he's an early Playmaker of the Week candidate for 4A, a big time contributor in this dub over Grand Junction Central. So congrats to them. Moving on here, we have Broomfield. They take care of Monarch 46-0. Loveland just barely gets by 3A Mountain View 15-12. Here's how it went down. Loveland was down 12-7 at half. Dion Christopher would score a rushing touchdown early in the third to give them the lead. And then a pass for the 2-point conversion after that touchdown would make it 15-12. After that, couple plays or a couple drives into the third, a key Tucker Jones interception in the third would end a prime Mountain View scoring opportunity. They were approaching the red zone there, and so that pick was big time to keep Mountain View away from scoring. And then in the fourth, with 9 minutes left, Mountain View would miss about a 35-yard field goal to tie the game there, so that would be tough for them. And then in the last minute of this game, Loveland would make another defensive defensive stand that would help them close this one out as they avoid another loss here, and they do get on the board with a very gritty effort. So there you go there. Loveland taking care of Mountain View 15-12. Moving on here, Centaurus, they take care of Nawat 49-7. Vista Ridge, they go to Wyoming. They beat Evanston 38-14 here. Speaking of out-of-state games, Durango, they would go to New Mexico, or they would play New Mexico's Piedra Vista and win 17-6. Cully Feeney, 5 of 15 for 74 yards and a touchdown, 31 rushing yards as well. Peyton Dyke at receiver, 2 receptions, 50 yards, and a touchdown in that one. And then, last but not least, on Friday, Thornton would lose to Westminster 56-6. So, boom, those are your games from Friday. Let's move to Saturday. We only have a couple 4A games to talk about, but Heritage would go ahead and play Arapahoe in the Milk Jug game, and unfortunately would lose 42-28. 4 passing touchdowns by Heritage, but it just wasn't enough. They were down 28-7 at half. Just not a great start to this one, even though they would score significantly more in the second half. Obviously not enough to beat Arapahoe as Heritage falls to them. And then 3A Windsor would go ahead and play Longmont, and they would blow them out 34-9 here. Longmont's struggles continuing without Colby Holmes over there. With new quarterback Avery Amaya, he won 13 of 20 for 135 yards, 1 touchdown there, no picks. And then you had Jacob Foote, the freshman here, 4 of 75. His brother Joey Foote, the junior, I believe his brother that is, 6 receptions for 40 yards. But all for naught in a loss here against Windsor. And then last but not least, Greeley West took care of business against Gateway 34-8. So there you go. That is your week 2, or your 2024 week 2 Colorado Boys High School Football 4A recap.
What is going on, y'all? This is Gino with the Playmakers Corner podcast, and I will be your guide this week for the 5A classification here in week 2. And we had a lot of really good games here, so let's go ahead and not waste any more time and jump right into this recap of games. And we're going to go ahead and start off here on Thursday, September 5th. Our first game is where we had Mountain Range slip to 0-2 on the season after falling to Thomas Jefferson by a score of 31-22. No stats, so let's go ahead and move on here, where we had Roston Valley grind out an absolutely awesome win here over Grandview as the Wolves fall to 0-2 here to start off the 2024 season. Things were slow offensively for both sides in this game, but it was Zeke Andrews who led the way offensively here for Roston Valley. He had 135 yards and a touchdown on 20 of 30 passing, while also adding 41 yards on 5 carries as well. The junior wide receiver Nico Bonallo had 10 catches for 70 yards, and Levi Rilos had a receiving touchdown. On defense, you had Matt Gates, who racked up a team-high 14 tackles and 2 sacks here for the Mustangs. And the Mustangs actually had 7 sacks as a team here in this one, with Brody Schaefer getting 2 sacks and a forced fumble to go with that. And sophomore Lars Jurgensen, Connor Kuro, and Robert Mendez also added 1 sack each. They weren't done there, though, as the Mustang defense also racked up 3 interceptions in this game, with Aiden G., Colby Kurtz, and Hunter Essen Price. Sorry if I mispronounced that. All of those boys got a pick. And for Grandview, it looked like Zay Nito did his thing once again here with 8 receptions for 145 yards and a touchdown. He was huge in this one for the Wolves. And you also had Kyler Vaughn, who racked up 7 receptions for 63 yards here for the Wolves. The QB Blitz McCarty had 226 yards and a touchdown and 2 interceptions, which is confusing because it says Roston had 3 interceptions, so I don't know which one's right. But anyways, on defense here for the Wolves, Marcus Nesbitt had 4 tackles for loss, and Brody Flores had 3 tackles for loss as well. Moving on now, we have Prairie View, who got the win over North Glen. It was a pretty close one here, a 22-14 win for Prairie View. And then in our last of the Thursday games, we have Horizon, who lost at home to the 8th-ranked Chatfield Chargers, 34-12 in that one. It was Brock Narva here for the Chargers, who racked up 112 yards and 2 touchdowns this week, and that was on 16 carries. And he also added a team-leading 70 yards and another touchdown on 4 receptions. And this is actually coming off of a 200-yard game in week 1. So this is definitely a hot start here for Narva. Cash Williams, the QB, had an up-and-down game with 180 yards and 2 touchdowns on 12 of 27 passing. Freshman receiver Rome Bell had 5 catches for 54 yards as well. And then on defense, Aiden Neschheim, sorry if I mispronounced that, put up 3 sacks and 7 tackles. Then you had Hunter Balderson, who had a team-leading 12 sacks and 2 tackles for loss. And then Logan Kundred had 9 tackles and 3 tackles for loss. And finally, Jackson Autry had an interception. So that will do it here in the Thursday games. Let's go ahead and move into the Friday night lights. Our first game being where Vista Peak Prep got their first win of the year over Overland, 15-13. We didn't get any stats here for Vista Peak, but for Overland, Jarius Ward finished with 59 yards and a touchdown on 15 carries. Avante Hendricks, though, probably had the biggest game here for Overland. He had 4 receptions for 102 yards and a touchdown and an interception on defense. And then also on defense here, you had Luis Amadeus Dupuis Spiva, sorry if I mispronounced that one, led the team in tackles, and he had an interception as well. Let's go ahead and talk about this Brighton versus Golden game, where Brighton got a road win here over Golden, and that will be their first win of the season for the Bulldogs. We didn't get any stats there for Brighton, so we're going to go ahead and talk about this Cherry Creek game. The number 1 ranked Bruins dominated Millard North in Nebraska by a score of 42-10. Unfortunately, no stats here, so you know what that means. We're going on to the next game, where Boulder got their first win of the season, 28-14 over Silver Creek at home. That is a big win here for Boulder. This is a program that has struggled recently in the last few years, so any sort of wins could definitely help this program out and maybe start to turn things around here sooner rather than later. We have another top 10 team playing in our next game, where we have Castleview, the number 10 ranked team. They shut out Chaparral at home 28-0. The story of this game was 6 interceptions for the Castleview defense. We had 2 for Sam Harry, including a pick 6 for him, and then 1 for Keegan Dianito, Jackson Brenner, Finn Harding, and Carson Aiken, who all had 1 interception each. On offense here for the SaberCats, Aaron Perry had 98 yards and a touchdown on 9 carries. And then the QB, Derek Gordon, went 10 of 17 for 110 yards, and he added a rushing touchdown. And then also on offense, Brody Closter was the leading receiver with 5 receptions for 63 yards. For Chaparral, it appears they finally have themselves a running back with Jarek Ashford, who ran for 133 yards on 19 carries in this game, and that is coming off of 2 other great games here. So definitely a hot start here for Ashford, and this is very promising for Chaparral in the future. Not in this game, obviously, though, but on defense here, Cade Slight led the team in tackles with 13. You also had Angus Garvey with 12 tackles and a tackle for loss. And then Nolan Segal had 10 tackles and a forced fumble. And then, of course, you had Beckett Bacon and Adrian Lee, who both had 1 sack each. Moving on now, we have Rock Canyon, who got a 31-26 win on the road here over Fossil Ridge. Very, very tough win there for Rock Canyon. It looks like we didn't get any stats here, unfortunately, for Rock Canyon in that big win here. But for Fossil Ridge on offense, it looks like Nick Cubat went 20 for 28 for 198 yards and 4 touchdowns and a pick. You also had Colton Pollock, who had 14 carries for 131 yards Owen Wind, who caught 2 touchdowns, and Luke Garvin, who led all receivers with 94 yards and a touchdown on 6 receptions. On defense here for Fossil Ridge, Jack Toshkoff had an absurd 21 tackle, 2 tackle for loss performance here in the loss to Rock Canyon. Next up here, we got another top 10 team where the number 9 ranked Eagle Crest Raptors dominated Fort Collins at home 30-6. For the Raptors on offense, Joe Steiner ran for 2 touchdowns, and Josh Wiley had 2 touchdowns as well, along with 142 yards on 21 carries. Burke Withicombe, sorry if I mispronounced that one, led all receivers with 6 receptions for 92 yards, and he also added 59 rush yards as well on 8 carries. For Fort Collins, Levi Hermson had 145 kick return yards and 23 punt return yards. So definitely a nice special teams game here for Fort Collins, but that's pretty much all the positives I could say for them. But next here we have Westminster, who slaughters Thornton on the road 56-6. No stats in that game, but that is definitely an expected win here for the electric Westminster offense. Next up here, we have our first matchup actually between 2 top 10 teams here in 5A, where we have the number 2 ranked Columbine Rebels, who got a close 16-14 win on the road over number 7 Legend. For Columbine, James Bassinger dominated on the ground here with 150 yards and 2 touchdowns on 22 carries, and then he also led the team with 9 tackles on defense. On defense here for the Rebels, Chris Angelini had a sack. But let's go ahead and talk about Legend here, where they had some very, very confusing offensive statistics, to say the least. For some reason, it looks like Nick Farley not only led the team in carries, he also had almost as many carries as Jaden Lawrence and Riken Banks combined. That is honestly so confusing, and when you combine the fact that this was only a 2-point game, it makes this loss even more unbelievable. I mean, in what world does your backup QB get 3 more carries than your Wyoming commit running back in a 2-point game? Unless I'm just missing an injury or something like that, that is just flat out inexcusable from the Legend offensive play calling. Defensively here for the Titans, though, Brody Schuss had a big game with 22 tackles and a tackle for loss. You also had John Niedringhaus with 16 tackles and a tackle for loss. And then Aaron Olson and Tatum O'Donnell both had double-digit tackles here for the Titans. And then wrapping things up here defensively for the Titans, it looks like Champ Jones and Raymond Bergner both had a sack here for the Titans. In our next game, it looks like Cherokee Trail got the 35-7 win on the road over Thunder Ridge. It looks like Tyson Smith might have had his best game as a varsity starter here for CT with 281 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no turnovers on 17 of 25 passing. So that is huge for Smith and the CT offense if that is any indicator of how this season's going to go. But you also had Brandon McCullough, who led all receivers with 121 yards and a touchdown on 6 receptions. Also offensively, you had Jacob Mathenge, who had 6 catches for 81 yards, and Cade Brook, who caught a touchdown pass. No stats here for the defense, but that is, once again, a big win here for Cherokee Trail. Moving on now, we have Douglas County, who shuts out Smoky Hill 45-0 on the road. On offense for the Huskies, Owen Coltman had himself 3 rushing touchdowns on 9 carries for 66 yards. Nolan Case also had 79 yards and a touchdown on only 7 carries. And then Jaden Adragna had 148 yards and a touchdown on 4 of 6 passing, and he also added a rushing touchdown. Also here for Douglas County, Roman Saiz, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, had a 77-yard receiving touchdown. On defense here for Douglas County, it looks like Caden Absher had 2 tackles for loss and a sack in this shutout win. And you also had Garrett Griffin, who had a sack and a forced fumble. That takes us to our next game, where Fountain Fort Carson got the shutout 28-0 win at home over Denver South. Sophomore Dakari Relaford had 127 yards and 2 touchdowns on 17 carries here for the Trojans. And then Terrence Morris finished with 86 yards and a touchdown on 18 carries. On defense, Tremaine Shaw recovered a fumble for a touchdown for the Trojans. Next up here, we have Rangeview, who beat Lakewood 27-14, so that is definitely a nice win there for Rangeview. Then after that, we have Fairview, who actually rushed for 231 yards in their 35-30 win over the number 6 ranked Arvada West Panthers on the road. For Fairview, Torrey Davis had 2 touchdowns for 104 yards and 14 carries, and then he also had 75 receiving yards and a touchdown on 2 receptions. He also had Jordan Rochelle put up 84 yards on 5 receptions, plus 56 yards and a touchdown on 10 carries on the ground. The QB Kai Ellison went 9 of 15 for 215 yards and a touchdown. And then on defense here for Fairview, Ryder Villarreal had the team leading 10 tackles, and Charlie Larson had a sack. For Arvada West, it was a great game here for Logan Duhacek, who went 18 of 24 for 230 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jackson Pyatt and Adrian Samala both rushed for a touchdown, and Aiden Garcia and Declan Hatch both had receiving touchdowns. On defense here, Jackson Pyatt had 16 tackles and 3 tackles for loss. Atticus Tillman had 10 tackles and a forced fumble. Kevin Sanchez had 15 tackles and a fumble recovery. And Jesse Truisdell had 10 tackles. That takes us to our final game here from Friday, where Regis falls to 0-2 on the season after getting shut out once again 44-0 by Brophy College Prep out of Florida. No stats in that game, but that is probably for the best here. Definitely a rough start for the Raiders to start off this season. Now we move on to our Saturday games, folks, from September 7th, and we only have one game here where Arapahoe took home the Milk Jug Trophy after beating Heritage 42-28 for their first win of the season. On offense for the Warriors, Trajan Frazier led the way here with 127 yards and 2 touchdowns on 15 carries. And then you had Andrew Smart, who led receivers with 67 yards and a touchdown on 3 receptions. On defense, Connor Gilchrist went crazy with 16 tackles and 2 tackles for loss. And then Brody Seek, sorry if I mispronounced that, Owen Sherrod and Braden Snow all had 2 sacks each. In the secondary, Sam Johnson had 2 picks, and Anthony Cloutra, sorry if I mispronounced that, had a pick as well. So that is a massive game defensively for Arapahoe to take home that Milk Jug Trophy over Heritage. And that, folks, is going to wrap things up in this 5A recap. This is Gino with the Playmakers Corner podcast, and I will see you all next week where I will be covering 1A for y'all. Peace out.
Our Coach V here, and I got your Week 2 power rankings here for the 2024 Colorado Boys High School football season. And these rankings are brought to you by Junkyard Training. Junkyard Training is located at 14697 East Easter Avenue, Centennial, Colorado, Suite E. And they offer speed training, youth sports training, weightlifting, rehab, and recovery. That includes cryotherapy, cupping, recovery boots, and more. Visit today or call 303-521-7594. So there you go there. Thank you, Junkyard Training. But in case you haven't heard of power rankings before, this is how it goes down. We have 5 members of the podcast, myself, Cody, Gideon, Gino, Phoenix. We all rank teams 1 through 10 individually. For each team that is ranked at 1, they get 10 points. 2, 9 points, 3, 8 points, 4, 7 points, and so on and so on. The team with the most points is ranked higher for our PMC rankings. So I do add up all the points for all the teams, at least all the ones that are getting votes, and that's how we do it and average it out here on the podcast. So as you listen, you're going to hear me refer to individual rankings from the other members and myself, as well as our PMC rankings. Our PMC rankings are the ones that are on the graphics, so just wanted to make that clear. But, let's go ahead and hop into it. Let's talk about these Week 2 rankings. Let's start in 1A here. Last week, had a couple of teams just outside getting votes in Yuma, Platte Valley, Meeker, and Burlington. And then even then, tied at 9 was Monte Vista and North Fork. At 8 was Payton, 7 Colorado Springs Christian, 6 Highland, 5 Forge Christian, 4 Centauri, 3 Buena Vista, 2 linemen, and at number 1 was Ray. Now, going into this week, we have a lot more teams that are just outside our top 10 here in Yuma, North Fork, Wiggins, Holyoke, and Platte Valley. I'm going to make sure I give everyone's reasons for each of these teams getting ranked here. Let's go ahead and start with Yuma. I'm the only one who has Yuma still ranked here. They played their first Colorado opponent and they killed them 50-7 here. They play Torrington here in a couple weeks. I don't know why there's so much time in between, but Torrington is actually in Wyoming, and I want to say we used to know a player who played for them back in the day as well. They're a nice program over there. 3A up in Wyoming, so that'll be a good test for them. I think Yuma's a good squad. They just need to play more games here, so we'll see what happens. That's why I have them here at 7. I think they are still that good. So there you go there. North Fork was tied with Yuma as far as point totals go, still outside of our top 10 here. But Cody had them at 9. He did not say anything for them. Gideon had them at 9 as well. North Fork didn't have a game. That's why they didn't say anything. So there you go there. Those were your points for them. Wiggins got votes. Gino had them at 8 or at 9, for them. He said they showed out against Meeker to move back into my top 10. So Gino has Wiggins in his top 10. Nobody else has Wiggins ranked here though. Holyoke got a vote here. They got a 10th vote here. Gideon put them in his top 10 at 10. He said blasted a solid Glen Rock team. So there you go there. And then Phoenix would vote for Olaf. He put them at 10. He said this, it's still early, but they are currently the top team in the Western Slope at 2-0 with an impressive 30-40 point wins. With how their schedule is looking and how they've been playing so far, playoffs may very well be in their future. So Phoenix has Olaf there right at 10. But those are all the teams just outside our PMC rankings. Let's go ahead and talk about the teams that made it in. Starting at 10 is Burlington, who moves up from being previously unranked here. Gideon has Burlington at 8, and Phoenix has Burlington at 9 in their personal rankings here. And so Gideon said no game for them. Phoenix also said DNP. So there you go. I think they both had them in there. But with other teams dropping out and falling, they naturally move up into our top 10. So there you go. According to our PMC rankings, they're at 10. Moving on at 9 is Monte Vista, who basically stays in the same spot here. I have them ranked pretty high, still at 4. They got a big win over Rye, a big passing attack win over them. So I really love that. Cody has them at 10. He said this, I overpunished this squad for a decent loss to Alamosa and the big win over Rye. We are back in the top 10. So he votes for Monte Vista. Gino also will vote for Monte Vista. He's putting them at 10. He said slaughtered Rye 43-7. So there you go there. That's good enough to put them at 9. At 8 is Colorado Springs Christian, who does move down 1. I currently have them at 6. Not moving them up or down. Cody said not going to move them down for not playing here. Gino just put in DNP. So there you go there. They keep their ranking. Or I guess they do move down a ranking with other teams moving ahead here, as they only move down 1 spot compared to last week. So there you go. Payton does move up 1 spot in their place. I put out a vote for Payton. They didn't play this last week, but with other teams losing, I feel like they deserve to move up here. They're one of a couple teams I've had in mind for a while now. Cody has them right here at 7. I believe he just keeps them there. Gino also has them at 7. They both basically just say dominant win over Lincoln. Dominant win over Lincoln. So there you go. Phoenix has them right here at 8. He says this, they got a big time win against a 2A that is historically not good, but back-to-back 50-plus point wins at 2-0 is enough to get them in my rankings. So there you go there. Payton moving up 1 spot now at 7. At 6 is Highland, who stays in the spot. I have them at 8. That doesn't change for me. Cody has them at 7. That doesn't change for him either. He just says a big win maintains the spot there. Gideon says this about Highland, who he has at 6. He said beat Platte Canyon by damn near 60. Gino says this about them. All he says is blowout win over Platte Canyon. And then Phoenix says, got a good shutout, but haven't faced any big-time opponents compared to Forge, so that's why they get the slight bump down, as he does move Highland down from 5 to 6, so nothing too crazy, but they still stay in the same spot. Speaking of the same spot, Forge Christian, they stay right here at 5 here. I do move them up, though, into my 9 spot from 10 to 9 here. Cody has Forge Christian at 5. He said big dubs, top spots. Gideon has Forge Christian here at 4. He just said W. Gino has them here at 4. He said 45-0 over a 2A squad. Forge Christian is absolutely scary. So there you go. And then Phoenix, last but not least, at 5. He said second week in a row, they went to someone's house and they shut them out. This time a 2A opponent in the academy. While I'm not going to put too much emphasis on them beating the academy, who I don't think is a great squad this year, it's another win to add on, so that's why I have them moving up personally in mind. But for now, they stay in the same spot. Moving on into our top 5 here, or deeper into our top 5. At 4, we have Buena Vista, who moves down a spot. I kept them at 3. Cody kept them at 3, and he also says this, close win is still a win, and for something that could have been a trap game, they survived. Gideon said this about Buena Vista, who he moves from 2 to 5. He said, much closer than it should have been against Platte Valley. Gino has Buena Vista at 5 as well, who he moves down 2 spots. He said way too close against Platte Valley, so they dropped to my 5 spot this week. And then Phoenix has Buena Vista at 4, moving down a spot. He said still got the win in a close game against Platte Valley, but Centauri gets the edge for having a win against a top 10 1A opponent so far. So Buena Vista does drop a spot. They didn't win as much as they could have against Platte Valley, but I do think Platte Valley's a decent 1A squad, so I'm not holding it against them. A win is still a win, but I'm not moving them up either. Now, a team that does move up in our power rankings is Centauri. I kept them at 5. Cody has them at 4. He said a 1-point win over a physical Pagosa team will entrench their spot here. Gideon has Centauri at 2 now, moving up a couple of spots. He said beat a high-octane Pagosa Springs team. Gino has Centauri at 3. He said that win over Pagosa shows that Centauri is absolutely in the mix for a top team in the 1A this year. And then Phoenix has Centauri at 3. He said beat Meeker last week, beat a 2A team by 1 this week. They are as advertised legit. So there you go. For me, I didn't move up Centauri just because I felt like they should have beat Pagosa, maybe if not by more, to be honest with you. But everyone else did, so that's why Centauri moved up a spot here. Still a good squad and one of the contenders here in a 1A though. Now at 2, same as last week as a lineman. I don't think this really changed for most of us here. I have lineman at 2. Cody has lineman at 1. He said still need to be beaten before they're dropped. Gideon has lineman at 3. He said showed grit, but I still don't feel comfortable with this line. Gino has lineman at 2, said Flatirons Academy played lineman quite close up until the 4th quarter. Lineman is in serious jeopardy of losing their 2 spot if they can't put together a dominating win soon here. And then Phoenix has lineman at 1, got the job done against a decent Flatirons team and still continuing to win games. Yeah, I mean, I have them at 2 as well, just because they continue to win games here. Maybe it's not as dominant as before, but it is early on in the season. A lot of pieces that need to gel together. I'm not panicking. They stay at 2 for now. If they want to move up to 1, they got to beat some big dogs. So there you go. Speaking of a big dog at 1 still is Ray. I have them at 1. Cody has them at 2. He said out of state of win. Let's go. Gideon has them at 1. He said still undefeated against a good out-of-state team. Gino has Ray at 1. He said still unbeaten as the top dog in 1A so far this year. And then Phoenix has Ray at 2. He said just a top-notch team right now that beat a 3A team in Goodland, Kansas. That solidifies them as 2. Absolutely agreed. Can't move them down for losing as they won. And they also beat a pretty good opponent out of state. So gotta give them credit there. So there you go. That rounds out our top 10. Once more, just outside in 1A, Yuma, North Fork, Wiggins, Holyoke, Olaf. At 10 is Burlington, 9 Monte Vista, 8 Colorado Springs Christian, 7 Payton, 6 Highland, 5 Forge Christian, 4 Buena Vista, 3 Centauri, 2 Lyman, and at number 1 still is Ray. All right, moving on to 2A. Last week had a couple teams just outside of our top 10, but getting votes in Brush, Eden, Alamosa, and Strasburg here. But then at 10, we had University, 9 La Junta, 8 Sterling, 7 Resurrection Christian. Tied for 5th was Delta and Elizabeth. 4th was Berthoud, 3 Wellington, 2 TCA. At 1 was Kent Denver. Now, going into week 2, we have 3 teams that are just outside here in Basalt, Alamosa, and Lamar. I will say this. I'd put Lamar in my 10th spot. Sterling lost to them. Lamar passed the ball and looked pretty solid, it sounded like, in that game. So I put them at 10, tentatively, as they are undefeated currently. And then Alamosa, I put them at 9 here. I mean, they're still undefeated, and they blew out Banning Lewis Academy, so they just move up a spot for me. So there you go there. Now, the other team that's just outside is Basalt. Gideon has them at 9. He said this, taking care of business both in the city and the country. So that's why he has them there. Gino has them at 10. He said, I know Basalt has struggled in the playoffs, but they enter my top 10 this week after yet another hot start to the season. Phoenix has them at 10. He said a blowout win against the newly promoted 3A Rifle was definitely enough to get them in the top 10, as he has them at 10. So there you go. But according to our PMC rankings, they are just outside. Now at 10, moving up from being unranked here, is Strasburg here. Cody put them at 9. He said a 2-0 start to a 2A classification ain't bad. Gideon said this about Strasburg, who he has at 8. He said they have adapted their winning ways for 2A. Aiden Dodge is a beast. Gino has Strasburg just outside, so not ranked. Phoenix has Strasburg at 9. He said this should have honestly been 2A 6 years ago, as they get their first 2A win as a 2A team against Montezuma Cortez after beating Platte Valley the week prior. Both were road wins. So yeah, there you go there. Impressive win to keep this thing rolling, as they are undefeated and claim the 10th spot in our PMC rankings. Now at 9 is University, who moves up a spot. I have them at 6 currently. Cody has them at 10 now. He said beat the top 10 team and earn yourself a top 10 spot. Gideon does not have University ranked anymore. Which is interesting. But he has Woodland Park at 10, and I forgot to mention them. They're a team that's obviously just outside. He said dominant win over a playoff hopeful in Saladas. So there you go there. Now Gino does have University at 9. He says this, University might slide even higher sooner the way they are taking care of business to start the year. And then Phoenix has University at 7. He said got the win against Brush. It was a big win against Brush. You know, this was a team who we thought was going to have a good defense. University showed that they are not missing any beats on offense, and I think that's always a plus, as you could count on their defense to kind of round out into shape as the season goes on. So there you go there. University moving up to 9. Now at 8 is La Junta, who was previously unranked here. Cody has them at 8. He said 70 burger ? Gideon has them at 7. 70-point win is all he says. Gino has them at 8, 70-point win, and then Phoenix has them at 6. He says this winning 74-7 looks impressive, but from personal experience playing 1A, even I know that Mitchell is not that much of a real challenge. Either way, a very impressive win that solidifies their spot in the rankings, and I gotta shout out Phoenix here, because that's exactly why I don't have them ranked. Mitchell is not that good of a team. They literally had all JV games last year, and they're still trying to find their footing here. I'm not really putting that much stock into them. I didn't have them ranked to start at all. So, yeah, I mean, they're not going to make my top 10 now. So, there you go there. But for now, La Junta moves up to 8. Now, tied at 6 is Resurrection Christian and Elizabeth here. Elizabeth technically moving down a spot from tied at 5th to 6th. Resurrection Christian moving up a spot. Let's go ahead and talk about Res here. I had Resurrection Christian at 5. Cody had them at 6. He didn't say anything. Gideon does not have Resurrection Christian ranked. Gino has them at 4. He said they won their first game of the year to solidify their top 4 spot in my rankings. And then Phoenix did not have Resurrection Christian ranked at all either. I mean, they continue to win. We know the talent that they have. That's it. Moving on. They do move down a spot for me personally, because I moved a team up ahead of them. So they do move down slightly, but for our PMC rankings, they technically move up from 7 to tied at 6 here, or just the same spot. So there you go. Now the other team here is Elizabeth. I have them at 7 here still. Cody has them at 7. He just had 50 burger. Gideon has Elizabeth at 5. He said 51-0 on a 3A team. Gino has Elizabeth at 7 here. And he didn't really have much to say. I believe they stay in the same spot for him. And then Phoenix has Elizabeth right here at 5. They did not play, so they neither move up or down for me. But, they are technically down one spot, but they are tied for 6th. So there you go there. Now our top 5 is the same as last week. At 5 still is Delta. I have them at 8. Cody has them not ranked still. Gideon has them at 6. He said beat Gunnison by 40. Gino has Delta at 6. He said 39-point win over Gunnison is almost enough for me to throw Delta in my top 5. The reigning state champs are banging on the door. And then Phoenix has Delta at 2 here, moving them up a spot. He said a big-time win against a team that got promoted from 1A to 2A in Gunnison and is by far one of the best teams in 2A. So there you go. Delta stays right there. At 4 is Berthoud. I actually moved Berthoud up from 5 to 4. Cody has Berthoud right here at 4. He said bounce back win. Gideon has Berthoud now at 3. He said destroyed Moffat County in a revenge. Gino has them at 3 as well. He said doesn't get much tougher than Berthoud. They slide back into my top 3 after the killing of Moffat County. And then Phoenix has Berthoud at 8. He said got the win against Moffat County here. It was a big time win. Their offense looks good. Quarterback is slinging the ball well, and that's not a bad team over there that they're playing against. Usually known for a good defense, so that's a good win. Against Thompson Valley, that was still like a close loss, so I don't really hold that against them. They stay at 4, or I guess they do move up to 4 because they win, but last week I didn't hold it against them, so there you go. But in our PMC rankings, they stay at 4. At 3 is still Wellington. I have them at 3 still. Cody has them at 3 still. He also says this rip for Lupton. Gideon has them at 2 still. He said Tanner Gray can sling that thing now. Gino has Wellington at 5. He said very impressive win over Fort Lupton. I'm still waiting on Wellington to beat a playoff team, though, before I can rise them into my top 3. And then Phoenix now has Wellington at 1. He said this solid win against a decent Fort Lupton team with more challenges on their horizon. This team is playing to win and will likely be the team to beat in 2A. I will say this, I probably lean more with Gino here. I need them to beat like a legit contender in 2A before moving them up any further. They beat Fort Lupton. That's a solid squad, but we all know Wellington has a bigger team than them. That really shouldn't have been a surprise. So there you go there, but they stay right here at 3. At 2 still is TCA, only a 1-point lead over Wellington now, as the rankings do stay the same, but the gap noticeably a little bit closer. I still have them at 1. I'll talk about that later. Cody has them at 2 still. He said Florence bludgeoning. Gideon moves them down from 3 to 4. He said beat Florence. 1 and 4 are basically a tie, is what he says as far as team rankings. Gino has TCA at 2. He said 30-point blowout win over Florence. And then Phoenix has them at 4. He said took care of business against Florence with a 30-point win. I already had TCA at 1. They beat Florence as expected, dominating. So I'm not going to change that. I still think they have a great defense, really strong up front. And then they have a quarterback in Drew Brown who honestly is probably the best quarterback or one of the best quarterbacks in 2A. But in my opinion, it is the best one. I'm just throwing that out there. So there you go there. Now, at number 1 still is Kent Denver. It stays the same for all of us. I had them at 2. Cody had them at 1. Gideon had them at 1. They didn't play a game, by the way. Gino had them at 1. And then Phoenix has them at 3. He does say this, DMP, but their schedule on next week's opponents against 1A Denver Christian isn't nearly as impressive or exciting as most of the 2A teams in their matchups they already had. So there you go. And I do kind of got to agree with that. Schedule is a little bit lacking, but I mean, we know how talented they are, so they're up here. So there you go. That's your 2A rankings after week 2. Once more, it's Basalt, Lamar, Alamosa, Woodland Park just outside, At 10 is Strasbourg, 9 University, 8 La Hunta, tied at 6 is Resurrection Christian and Elizabeth. At 5 is Delta, 4 Berthoud, 3 Wellington, 2 TCA, and at number 1 still is Kent Denver. All right, now talking about 3A here. Still another crazy week with a lot of movement. Last week, we had Wheat Ridge and Pueblo East just outside, but at 10 was Palisade, 9 Discovery Canyon, 8 Thompson Valley, 7 Holy Family, 6 Meade, 5 Roosevelt, 4 Windsor, 3 Pueblo Central, 2 Lutheran, and at number 1 was Green Mountain. Now, this week there's only one team that is just outside here, and that is Harrison. Phoenix voted for them at 10. He put them at 10. He said beat 2 4A teams to start their season 2-0, which, yes, I do have to agree is pretty impressive. But for now, they are just outside. Now at 10 is Holy Family, who moves down a couple spots. I moved them down to 10. Cody has them at 9. He said, I'm not punishing Holy Family for a close game against one of the best teams in 3A, but a loss is a loss and a drop nonetheless. Gideon has also moved down Holy Family. He said this, lost by double digits to Roosevelt. Gino has Holy Family at 9. The reigning state champs are staying tough despite losing a ton of talent from last year here. And then Phoenix does not have Holy Family in his top 10 as of right now. And I agree. I mean, I think they're still a top 10 team. I don't know where their ceiling is yet personally. But them playing Roosevelt is definitely a little bit of a green flag. Playing them close, that is definitely a little bit of a green flag despite the loss. But I don't know. We'll just have to see what happens moving forward here. Now at 9 is Wheat Ridge, who moves up from being unranked. As you could tell, the last couple weeks they were getting votes. Now they are finally ranked as they're at 9 here. I have them at 9 in my personal rankings. Cody has them at 7 in his personal rankings. He said this, 47 points to start your season. Feels nice against a solid enough team in Stanley Lake. That's not a bad launch pad for the season. Gideon has Wheat Ridge at 10 now. He said blasted Stanley Lake, a former 4A team. Gino said this, 47 points and their first win of the season over Stanley Lake for the Farmers to stay up in my top 10. And then, last but not least, Phoenix, he had Wheat Ridge right here at 9. He said good win to start their season against 3A opponent Stanley Lake. And gotta agree there. So they do move up from previously being unranked. I think this was their first game here, so them just getting on the board is definitely big time. Now at 8 is Discovery Canyon, who I have at 8 as well on my personal rankings, moving up a spot after their big time win. Cody has DCC back at 10. He said this, a nice win over a different Pueblo opponent, retains Discovery Canyon's spot in the top 10. Gideon has them at 8. He said still a top roster and best a well-regarded Pueblo East roster. Gino has Discovery Canyon at 8. He said they got a big-time bounce-back win over Pueblo East, but I'm going to need to see more from DCC before they want to grab their top 5 spot back. Phoenix, he has Discovery Canyon at 8. He says this, good win against Pueblo East. Agreed there. So Discovery Canyon moves up after a tough loss last week, getting back in the winning column this week. Now at 7 is Thompson Valley, who moves up a spot. In my personal rankings, they were previously unranked. I have moved them up to 7 with the wins they've collected here. Cody has Thompson Valley at 8. He said this nice blowout win to pop up when others lose. Gideon says this about Thompson Valley, continued dominance in a blowout win over Greeley Central. Gino has them at 7 as well. He said they killed Greeley Central as expected. Not sure if they have potential to move in the top 5 with how stacked the top of 3A is this year. And then Phoenix also has them at 7, put out a shutout performance. So there you go there. It's a good win. I mean, they took care of business against Greeley Central. They beat a tough Berthoud team. Right now they're undefeated, so they move up a spot in our PMC rankings. Now, let's get to 6 here, and this is where things get a little crazy. At 6 is Windsor, who actually moves down 2 spots compared to last week in our PMC rankings. In my personal rankings, they moved down 1. Cody has them at 4 still, though. He's a nice bounce-back clobbering over a vulnerable Longmont squad to reestablish themselves as a threat. Gideon, he has Windsor at 6, beat Longmont in a blowout as expected, so he neither moves them up or down. Gino has them at 6 here still, or actually moved them down compared to last week, 1 spot. He said smashing Longmont is a good sign for the Wizards. I knocked them down a spot, though, after Roosevelt took care of Holy Family, and I did pretty much the same thing. Phoenix said this about Windsor, who he has at 4, moving down a spot. He said, beat Longmont, which is a 4A team, but can't put them higher than Green Mountain with the season opening loss to them. So there you go. Windsor, they're a good team. You know, they did lose a key piece, but they're still a good team here. It's just a very stacked 3A classification, so lots going on. But let's move on here, moving into our top 5 here. At 5, we have Pueblo Central, who also moves down 4 spots. I kept them at 4. Cody has them at 6. He said this game was not as hard as last week, but a win is a win. Gideon has them at 3 here, same as last week. He said destroyed an experienced Eden team and ran all over that defensive line. Gino has Central at 3 here. He said the Wildcats keep things rolling with a dominating win over a tough Eden team. And then Phoenix said this about Central, who he has at 6, same as last week. He said prove they can beat good teams after their win against Eden a week after a big win against Discovery Canyon. So there you go there. And honestly, now that I'm looking at this, I believe they only moved down. I think everyone had them at the same spot, but I moved a team that was behind them up, and so that's why they moved down a spot or 2. So there you go. But they continue to win. They're undefeated. But like I said, a lot of great teams out here. Speaking of great teams, let's talk about one of them in Meade, who's now at number 4, who moves up a couple of spots. I actually moved Meade up to 2, and it's because they beat a tough Frederick team. This Frederick team, if they played in 3A, would definitely have been one of the contenders here, or at least a top 10 team. I would say they have a lot of explosive offensive firepower, and Meade, I mean, their defense came to play. They dominated up front. They limited a Frederick team who has one of the best dual threats in the entire state. And, you know, they squeezed out a win, which is all you could hope for. Meade, I mean, they have proven that they could stop good offenses. I mean, you look at Pueblo South, who they beat. They put 35 on Falcon, who had a solid defense, right? And that was a team who they blew out last week. So Meade, I think, is a very underrated team. They're a grinded out team. They're a team that you really don't want to face because they're going to play tough defense. They're going to slow things down, and they're going to make the plays that they need to make. So I have them moving up personally up to 2. And in our power rankings, they move up to 4 here, a couple of spots. Now, Cody, he has Meade at 5 here. Same as last week, he said they remain undefeated after coming back and beating a solid Frederick team from behind to retain one of the top spots in 3A. Gideon said this beat a familiar 4A squad, and the O-line would still beat 90% of the lines in the state. Gino says this about Meade here. 2-point win over a sneaky Frederick team keeps Meade at my 4 spot. And then Phoenix has Meade at 5, moving up a couple of spots. He said they get the edge over Pueblo Central after a close win against 4A opponent Frederick. Big win against an I-25 rival. So there you go there. Meade moving up a couple of spots for all of us, moving into our top 5 actually. Now at 3 is Roosevelt, who also moves up 2 spots compared to last week. I have them at 3. I previously had them at 6. I'll explain why. I mean, they beat Holy Family. That was a kind of a gritty game. It was very close in that first half, but then they pulled it out and pulled away as well. It wasn't like they just squeezed by. They definitely pulled away, and that makes me feel really good. Josiah Ramirez over there at quarterback, he looks like he was balling. They got Noah Lucero the ball a ton against a solid Holy Family team. That makes me feel good about that team moving forward, so that's why I bumped them just a bit here. Cody also bumped up Roosevelt by 1 spot in his personal rankings. He has them at 2 now. He said another classic showdown with Holy Family resulting in a Rough Rider dub and a slight slide up 1 spot. Gideon has Roosevelt at 5 here, same as last week. Beat the reigning champs, who a lot of outlets still had at number 1 for some reason, and I don't know why either. Gino has Roosevelt at 5. He said it looked close for a while, but Roosevelt still got a big-time win over Holy Family to stay in my top 5. And then Phoenix He has Roosevelt at 2. He said big win against top 10 opponent in Holy Family and a real 3A contender. So there you go there. Roosevelt moving up a spot. Now, at 2 is Green Mountain, who moves down a spot. I actually moved them down from 2 to 5 here. Now explain why after I say everyone else's reasons. But Cody has Green Mountain at 3, who he previously had at 1. He said not the result they were hoping for, but this and a great showing against Windsor is still worth a 3 spot. Gideon has Green Mountain at 2, moving them down a spot. He said may have lost, but it was a top 10 team. Top 10 4A team, still a top team. Jeez. Gino has Green Mountain at 2, who he moves down a spot. He said Green Mountain loses their top spot after that loss to Dakota Ridge, but I still think they could grab it back in the next couple of weeks. And then Phoenix moves Green Mountain from 1 to 3. He says this big win against Windsor to losing by 17 to Dakota Ridge is humbling, but they shouldn't be knocked out of the top 3 for losing to a 4A team. And yeah, I gotta agree, that's a good Dakota Ridge team over there. But you know, it's not a team that you couldn't have beat. Like, it would have made sense for them to beat them, honestly. And they did it. So they moved down a spot from number 1. But now at number 1 is Lutheran here. Cody has them at 1 now. I've always had Lutheran at 1, by the way, so that's not changing for me. But Cody says this is a 50-point performance to follow up an out-of-state win, and being undefeated is a good case for 1. Gideon says this absolutely blasted Fort Morgan, who he has now moved up to 1. Gino, we've all moved Lutheran up to 1. This is unanimous, by the way. But Gino, he says this about Lutheran. This Lutheran offense looked deadly as ever after they put up 56 in a win over Fort Morgan to move up to my 1 spot. And then Phoenix says this big win to keep them undefeated and proving that they are a top team in 3A. I knew that they would be able to move up here to number 1. I had them at 1. They're very well rounded on both sides of the ball, have a good running game. They have a quarterback who's been balling out, playing in the system very well. Defense looks good. They got some big bodies up front. This team's a problem, and they're always well coached. So there's no surprise that they're at number 1. But there you go there. That's our week 2 rankings for 3A. Just outside is Harrison. At 10 is Holy Family. 9 Wheat Ridge. 8 Discovery Canyon. 7 Thompson Valley. 6 Windsor. 5 Pueblo Central, 4 Meade, 3 Roosevelt, 2 Green Mountain, and at number 1, now your new team at number 1 is Lutheran. All right, now let's talk about 4A here. Last week, we had 3 teams that were just outside our top 10 officially in Doherty, Ponderosa, and Centaurus. At 10 is Monarch, 9 Rampart, 8 Vista Ridge, tied for 6th is Dakota Ridge and Montrose, 5 Pueblo West, 4 Heritage, 3 Palmer Ridge, 2 Broomfield, and 1 Mesa Ridge. Now, going into week 2, there are 2 teams that are just outside here in Thomas Jefferson and Centaurus. Phoenix put Centaurus at his 10th spot. He said so far still undefeated and only allowing a touchdown in each of their 3 games. So there he goes there with Centaurus. With Thomas Jefferson, myself and Cody put them in our top 10 here. I put them at 9, actually. They continue to win, and it looks like they have a quarterback here as they are passing it a lot more, so I'm optimistic about them. Cody has them at 10. He said this squad is still undefeated, which will do for this week, but a true 10th team feels super unstable in 4A right now, which I do have to agree with that. And it's ironic because, so those are the 2 teams that are just outside. At 10, we don't have a 10th team. We have 2 teams tied for 9th in Riverdale Ridge and Ponderosa, who are both moving up from being unranked here. Ponderosa making a return to the top 10 for the first time since the preseason. But let's go ahead and talk about Riverdale Ridge. I have them here at 10. Cody does not have them ranked here. Gideon has them at 10. He says the Ravens continue on the roll and seem to be adopting to 4A well here. Gino has them at 9. He said 2 blowouts to start the year gets you in my top 10 for 4A, as they are currently undefeated, by the way. And then Phoenix has them at 9. He said, gave a lot of praise to Wellington for traveling to Florida and getting a win. Riverdale did the same and a shutout to Pooter this weekend. So there you go there. That was good enough for them to be tied for 9th here and being ranked. Now, Tied for 9th with them is Ponderosa. I don't have them ranked, but Cody has them at 9. He said they beat Rampart. Gideon has them at 9, a win over a former top 10 team in Rampart, but coaching decisions still make me question them. Gino has them at 10. That win against Rampart was a grind for sure. The 10th spot is tough this week, though, and I'm going to give it to the Mustangs. And then Phoenix doesn't have Ponderosa ranked either. So there you go. The two teams tied at 9 in Ponderosa and Riverdale Ridge. Moving on at 8, we have Vista Ridge, who stays at the same spot as they were last week here. Myself and Cody didn't have anything to say, but we kept them in the same rank. Gideon has them at 8 here, moving them up into his top 10. He said dominant win over an out-of-state opponent. Gino has them at 8 here. He did not have anything to say about them as he keeps them here. And then Phoenix has Vista Ridge moving up 2 spots to 8. He said 2-0 now after traveling to Wyoming for the win. So there you go. Enough said there. They took care of business. At 7 is Heritage, who moves down a couple of spots here. I have them at 8 now. Cody has them at 6. He said slid down a little bit after losing to ARAP. Compared to some other teams with 5A opponents, it was not as bad. So there you go there. But they still slide a couple of spots for Cody. For Gideon, he now slides them down to 7. The loss to Arapahoe doesn't feel good, but the Eagles still have the top 10 or still have the top receiving core in 4A. I don't know about that. But there you go there. Gino has Heritage at 7. He said, I don't want to drop Heritage this far, but they give me no choice after that bad loss to Arapahoe. And then Phoenix has them at 7. He said, tough loss to Arapahoe, but a 5A loss won't knock them completely out of the rankings. I'm not going to lie. I felt like Heritage could have beat Arapahoe this year. Arapahoe has decided to go with a senior at quarterback instead of their phenomenal freshman quarterback. And they're okay. I mean, they're fine, you know. And I felt like Heritage, this was a perfect year for them to beat them. And it was just a missed opportunity. The score looks a lot closer than what it actually was. They were down 28-7 at half. So that's just really tough. That's a tough pill to swallow for sure here, so we'll see. And also, by the way, I said I don't think they have the top receiving core in 4A because I think it's, in my opinion, Mesa Ridge, and there's not too much of an argument there. Or Broomfield. I don't know, but either way, Heritage drops in our rankings. Now, at 6 still is Dakota Ridge, staying in the same spot here. Cody said this about them. Nice bounce back win over Green Mountain as they prepare for their more regular scheduled program of 4A comp. Gideon said Green Mountain is one of the best teams in the state overall. Beating the Rams by double digits give me hopes for the Eagles. Gino says beating a very good Green Mountain squad like that moves Dakota Ridge up to 6 in his personal rankings this week. And then Phoenix says this about Dakota Ridge. Bounce back from a loss to 5A Chatfield by taking care of business against the highly regarded 3A Green Mountain. Agreed, you know. So they maintain, they get back into the winning column, they keep their 6th spot. Now, staying right here in this next spot at 5 is Pueblo West, who stays here. Cody says this, survived a scare and will keep marching on. Gideon says this about Pueblo West, concerning score against Pomona. The Panthers have no business being that close to Pueblo West, but this shows that the Cyclones have no run defense. Pomona doesn't pass, so Pueblo West could only have allowed crazy runs. Gino says this about Pueblo West, that close game against Pomona is very concerning in my opinion. It makes me wonder if the Cyclones should be considered real contenders. And by the way, Gino moving them down a couple of spots to his 5th spot. Phoenix says this about West, 3-0 with Heritage and Monarch taking losses this past weekend, elevates West into the top 10. Phoenix, I don't think, had Pueblo West in his top 10 before, so they move up for him. So, yeah, I gotta agree. Definitely very concerning against Pomona, but, you know, this is a Pueblo West team that likes to run the ball, and it ended up being kind of an issue, you know. They only passed the ball 6 times and only completed 2 passes this game, really. That's a red flag. just a little bit there for Pueblo West, but it's nothing that we haven't known before. We'll see what happens, but, they continue to tread. So there you go. Now at 4, moving up 3 spots compared to last week, is Montrose. Cody says this about them: looking dominant as ever after they beat Palisade. Gideon says beating Palisade like crazy, and the most remote school in the state still holds an advantage in almost any matchup. Gino says Montrose continues to dominate as they enter my top 4, moving up for him. Phoenix says beat a good Palisade team, no reason to move them down. So yeah, I moved Montrose up a couple spots from 8 to 5 here. I mean, they're also undefeated, so you got to give them credit here. And Palisade, I think, is a strong squad that has some size up front to challenge them a little bit. So for them to win the way they did is definitely a good thing. So there you go. Now at 3 still is Palmer Ridge, moving neither up or down. Cody said this: looking like a team that is mad about last season and playing on a mission. Gideon says, I don't know how the Bears keep doing it, but the Monument Moving Company is still a top offensive line. Gino says 86 to 7 point differential to start the year keeps Palmer Ridge in the top 3. And then Phoenix said executed a perfect shutout and retains their spot. Yeah, they continue to roll here. They passed the ball a lot more against Doherty than they did Ponderosa, and it was pretty successful. Obviously they're still going to lean on the run, but it's always a good thing to see them having another dimension. That is thriving, at least. Now, at 2 is Mesa Ridge, who moves down a spot. Myself and Cody still have them at 1 in our personal rankings. Cody says this one was tight, but still a win. Gideon has Mesa Ridge at 3. He said concerning game against Northfield, but being able to win shootouts is a skill. Gino has them at 2. Says this very concerning shootout against Northfield moves Mesa Ridge down a spot in my rankings. And then Phoenix says close win against Northfield, but it was a little too close for comfort as they are now moved down a spot there in his rankings. And yeah, I understand Mesa Ridge moving down a spot. I don't know why they allowed 40 plus points to Northfield, but you can't do that. So there you go. Now they also scored 50, give credit where it's due, but definitely not a good thing, I would say. They definitely could still clean some things up here. Still a top 2 team, though, in 4A. But moving up to number 1 is Broomfield. Me and Cody have Broomfield at 2, and Cody says this retains their spot in his personal rankings. Gideon has Broomfield at 1, beat a top 15 quality Monarch team in a blowout, and already destroyed Frederick. Gino said absolutely slaughtering the 10 ranked team in our power rankings gives Broomfield the 1 spot in my rankings. Phoenix said good shutout against a solid Monarch team, as Broomfield, showing no weaknesses, goes ahead and claims that 1 spot. So there you go. That is 4A. Once more, just outside of Centaurus and Thomas Jefferson. Tied at 9th is Riverdale Ridge, Ponderosa. 8 is Vista Ridge, 7 Heritage, 6 Dakota Ridge, 5 Pueblo West, 4 Montrose, 3 Palmer Ridge, 2 Mesa Ridge. At number 1 is Broomfield. So there you go. That's after week 2. Now, last but not least, we got 5A. Last week, we had a couple of teams just outside in Ralston Valley and Fairview getting votes, but at 10 was Castleview, 9 Eagle Crest, 8 Chatfield, 7 Legend, 6 Arvada West, 5 Valor Christian, 4 Mountain Vista, 3 Denver East, 2 Columbine, and at number 1 was Cherry Creek. Now, this week, there's a lot of shakeup here. Only one team stays in the same spot here. So let's go ahead and start with the 2 teams who are just outside in Arvada West and Legend. I still have Arvada West in my top 10 here. I have them at 8 personally. Gino has them at 10. He says this: tough loss to a very good Fairview team. And I agree. At the end of the day, it was still a close loss. They only lost by 1 score. They just ran out of possessions when it came down to it with the new play style that Fairview has. So that's just tough. I'm moving down Arvada West from 4 to 8, so they do drop 4 spots here. But don't get it twisted. This is still a pretty well-rounded team here. Their quarterback did not play bad, which I think is definitely a green flag there. They're able to score at will. Defensively, though, obviously, I think you want to not allow 30 points to a wing T offense, but we'll talk more about that later. Now, Legend is the other team getting votes here. I want to say Gideon is the only one who has Legend in their top 10. He has them at 8. He says continuing to win and has an extremely talented backfield. Legend did not win. They lost to Columbine, and that is why we have all unranked them. But it was a close loss, so I understand them being in some people's top 10s, kinda. But I'm not going to rank them in my top 10. Just for the same reason I said last week. Got to be a top 10 team to get into the top 10. Not only did they lose to Columbine, but this was a very preventable loss. So, as always, self-sabotage for Legend. So, there you go. Now, at 10, though, is Ralston Valley, who moves up from being unranked. I've had them at 10 here. Cody just says, in Yanacito, we trust. So there you go. Gino has them at 9. He said that win over Grandview shows that Ralston once again has that dog in him. Phoenix has Ralston Valley at 8. He said a close 10-9 win against Grandview is just that, a win. Losses by Legend in Arvada West gives them the slight rise. So there you go. Ralston Valley, I mean, it was a close win over Grandview, and this is a pretty solid team. They have a good secondary, so they're going to be able to counter what Ralston Valley does best, which is throw the ball. So for them to still find a way to win, that's definitely big time. Gotta love that. They move up to 10 in our rankings. Now at 9 is Fairview. I don't have them ranked in my top 10. Cody has them here at 10. I'm going to get to his reasons here in a minute because he wrote a paragraph. Gideon has them at 7. Smack Day West, one of the most talented rosters in the state. I don't know about Smacked. Gino doesn't have Fairview ranked. And then Phoenix has Fairview at 6. He said got a big win against Arvada West. Cody has Fairview at 10. And I'm going to say this one more time. This is what Cody had to say. But he said this: after being one of the crown jewels of spread offenses, the Knights have officially decided if you cannot beat him, join him, and have gone full sellout into a wing tee at the cost of their players' development and the state's legitimacy. But hey, at least they're 2-0, and in the top 10 of our 5A rankings, that becomes less nationally esteemed every consecutive week. Make sure, and this is all in caps here, so I'm going to say this with a lot of emphasis and aggressively, make sure they know Cody Stauffer is calling out 5A Colorado tackle football culture and coaches for being a disappointment, for not being able to stop the wing T. So there you go there. I 100% agree. I don't know what Fairview's doing, but I'm not going to rank them at 10. So there you go. Everyone else can do that, and they are in our PMC rankings, moving up to 9. Now, at 8 is Castleview, who moves up a couple of spots here with some losses. I had them at 9 still, not moving them up or down. Cody has them here. He said they won 28-0. Next in caps. So there you go. Gideon has Castleview at 10. He said took care of business against Chap. That's it. Gino has Castleview at 7. The Sabercats beat Chaparral as expected, so they move up a few spots this week. And then Phoenix, he has Castleview at 10. He said giving them a spot in the rankings after their shutout win over Chaparral. So there you go. Nothing more really to be said there. They really move up because some other teams lost. But still, a win's a win, and it was a dominant one at that. So there you go. Now, tied at 6th is Eagle Crest and Chatfield, both moving up here in our rankings. Let's talk about Eagle Crest first. I have them at 5, moving up a spot. Cody has them now at 4, still at 4. He said this: dispatched of another opponent big time. Gideon has Eagle Crest at 9. He said blew out a good Fort Collins team and stopped the run on one of the top lines in the state. Gino has Eagle Crest at 6. Another blowout keeps Eagle Crest in the top 6. And then Phoenix has Eagle Crest at 9. He said able to go 2-0 after making the trip to Fort Collins and getting the win. So there you go there. Now Chatfield, the team tied with them. They are at 6 here for me and Cody. He said overcame the initial scare to beat a solid Horizon team. Gideon said blasted a Horizon team that headed by a top 2 quarterback. Gino says this about Chatfield, who he has a 9. They got away with a nice win over Horizon after it was a close game initially. Chatfield should stay in the top 10 for a while this season. And then last but not least, Phoenix had this to say about Chatfield. Had the more dominating win against Horizon, so they get the edge over Ralston Valley. So there you go there. Eagle Crest and Chatfield tied for 6th. Now going into our top 5 is Valor Christian, who basically just stays here. They did not play this last week, but I'll still read off everyone's reasons for them being ranked the way they are. So Cody says this, putting them at 8. Week off, so they hang out. Gideon has them at 4, continued dominance, and one of the best lines in the state. So there you go there. Gino says this about Valor, DNP, and then Phoenix also just put in DNP. So there you go. The only team that stays the same compared to last week's rankings at 5. Now at 4 is Denver East, who does slide just slightly down a spot. I still have them at 3. Cody now has them at 5. Gideon has them at 5. He just says winning. Gino has them at 4. He said another much expected blowout. We have to wait 2 more weeks before the Angel schedule gets serious and they play Eagle Crest, which will be very serious. Phoenix says this about Denver East, DNP there. So there you go there. They mostly slide because a team moves up here, and that team would be Mountain Vista moving up 1 spot. I have them at 4. Cody has them at 3, and he says this, the Eagles just keep on rolling. Gideon says they keep blasting the rest of the state and did it against a playoff level opponent. Gino now has Mountain Vista at 1 here. This stacked Golden Eagle squad joins their girls flag team as number 1 in my power ranking. Shout out girls flag football. Make sure you check out those episodes. And then Phoenix has Mountain Vista at 3. He said dominating win over Erie. That legitimizes their presence in 5A. So yeah, Mountain Vista moving up a spot as they continue to win. Now, here's the interesting thing. At number 2 is Cherry Creek, who moves down a spot. I am the only one who has Cherry Creek ranked at 1, and I'll explain my reasons after I talk about everyone else. But Cody has them at 2. He said, took care of business against this regarded Nebraska squad, and are probably about to make an example to other Colorado teams against a struggling Regis team. Gideon says this, still good, but they probably could have won by more. Gino has them at 3. He said took care of business in Nebraska. And then Phoenix says this, got the win against Millard North, but I'm still waiting to see how they do against in-state opponents. And I'm just going to be honest, a lot of the teams that they are playing are better than opponents that 5A teams here are playing. First off, I don't think there's a team like Skyridge from that Utah team here in 5A. Just being real. Millard North, I'm sure there are probably a lot of other teams. That's fine. And then, I mean, their other out-of-state game, because they have one more after this week, is against Highland Park. I am extremely familiar with Highland Park from Dallas. That's where Matthew Stafford played football, in case you didn't know. A very rich program down there, both in history and money. And they're a good team. And I'm just going to be honest with you. Cherry Creek could lose all these out-of-state games, and I would still probably put them at 1 until they lose an in-state game. This week they play Regis Jesuit. I'll be at that game. I don't know how close that will be, but I know that I have Cherry Creek favored because they are kind of going through a gauntlet of out-of-state games here, and that's going to make them tougher for it. You know, playing in these tough games against very good opponents and whatnot. That's definitely going to make them tougher for it, at least by experience, and we'll just have to see what goes on from there. But I'm keeping them at 1 until they lose to a Colorado team. So plain and simple, there you go there. Now at number 1 right now is Columbine. I have them at 2. Cody has them at 1, but he wrote them in as Littleton West. Gideon has them at 1. He said continued dominance undefeated. Gino has them at 2. It was close against Legend, but the Rebels continue to take care of business against top tier opponents. And then Phoenix has them at 1. He said able to get a key win on the road against Legend. That puts them at 2-0, getting the edge over Cherry Creek. So there you go. I'm not moving Columbine up or down. They continue to win. That's to be expected. Against a Legend team, I mean, they beat them, but that's definitely a team that I don't exactly trust when it comes to big-time games like this. So there you go, and that is a shot. So that's our top 10. Just outside is Arvada West and Legend. At 10 is Ralston Valley. 9 Fairview. 8 Castleview. Tied for 6 is Eagle Crest and Chatfield. 5 Valor Christian. 4 Denver East. 3 Mountain Vista. 2 Cherry Creek. And now, number 1 is your defending state champs from last year, Columbine. So that is our power rankings. Once again, brought to you by Junkyard Training. Remember, Junkyard Training, located at 14697 East Easter Avenue in Centennial, Colorado. That's Suite E. They offer speed training, youth sports training, weightlifting, rehab, and recovery. That includes cryotherapy, cupping, recovery boots, and more. Make sure you visit them today or call 303-521-7594.
Thank you, Coach V, for that power rankings recap here. And now we're going to head into the final stretch, the final leg of this episode, but one of my favorite segments that we always get to do here, and that is talking about our Playmakers of the Week here in Colorado football, given to a player that sticks out above the rest and one who is ready to perform similar to any athletes who visit Codered Coaching. Be sure to visit CoderedCoaching.com, where the grind of greatness starts with the mind. Enhance your mental performance and, in turn, your performance in game, in life, or any level of competition here. Codered Coaching is headed by Cody Rosenthal here. Be sure to email rosecj.6599@gmail.com and go ahead and get in touch with Codered Coaching so that way you could stick out like these athletes here on this edition of Playmakers of the Week. So, starting with all of the nominees, let's go ahead and talk about just a ton of players that put things together here on the 1A level. That's what I was in charge of here. And these 3 players, these 3 nominees, are 2 defensive players primarily and 1 offensive player here. We have Trey Cardwell from Buena Vista here, who had 7 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and a fumble return for a touchdown here in a 39-35 win over Platte Valley here. This was a very well-earned win here for the Demons here, and one where every single play mattered, and so a fumble recovery for a touchdown, being able to get that production on defense was critical to them remaining undefeated and being one of our top teams in 1A. Additionally, another defensive player here who made some noise out of Yuma here, one of their premier athletes over the past few years, Jonathan Thompson here, 3 interceptions, 2 pick sixes, and 114 total rush yards against Roaring Fork here. All in all, this Yuma team had 5 total interceptions, but only Thompson gets 2 pick sixes and the majority of the interceptions in this 50-7 win over Roaring Fork. Lastly here, but certainly not least, is Caden Madrid out of Monte Vista here. He went 12 of 17 for 303 yards and 6 touchdowns in a blowout win over Rye here. And yeah, that's just a great standing here and is actually going to tip my hat at my selection for Playmaker of the Week on the 1A level. It's going to be Caden Madrid here. Look, passing for over 300 yards on just 12 completions and every other pass you throw being a touchdown is just a fantastic performance. And I love highlighting quarterbacks on the 1A level who are lighting it up as kind of a call out a little bit to the rest of the state that there's not really an excuse here to not be able to air it out a little bit here, especially when Monte Vista on the 1A level is able to do so effectively, so efficiently, and strong enough to, turn my neck enough and push them back up into my personal top 10 for power rankings. Go ahead and listen to the rest of my reasonings and everyone else's on power rankings on the former segment here. But the 1A Playmaker of the Week, Caden Madrid for the Monte Vista Pirates. As for 2A here, I'm going to pass the mic back to Phoenix here on his thoughts on Playmaker of the Week.
And finally, we're going to go to a Playmaker of the Week. And when I think about a playmaker, I think about someone that provides on both offense and defense. I know that's kind of a little bit difficult, especially as we go into the higher classifications because we see more players playing one position. But the players that do play 2 positions, they leave an impact. And my Playmaker of the Week is going to be Wellington's number 4, Tanner Gray, the quarterback and defensive end, for his performance. 9 for 13 for 205 yards and 3 touchdowns, including that 91-yard pass. And on defense, he had 3 sacks and 2 QB hurries and 4 total touchdowns. And for those reasons, he is my playmaker of the week for 2A. And thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope to see you next week.
Thank you, Phoenix, for filling us in on that. And obviously, if you listen to Gideon's recap of Wellington and Fort Lupton, you probably could have seen this one coming as well. But continuing on to 3A here, speaking of Gideon, he had quite a decision to make here, as there were a few pretty good performances here, headlined by Isaac McCune here from Wheat Ridge, 14 of 18, 273 yards, 5 passing touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown in a win over Stanley Lake. You also had Milo Pascal here, 3 rushing touchdowns, a pick 6 that went for 45 yards against top 10 Holy Family. And then you also had Matt Harms, 83 rush yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 33 receiving yards, 6 tackles, 5 pass deflections, and a 79-yard pick 6 for Canyon City on top of a 1-point conversion. But Gideon here in his reasoning says, quote, Milo scored 4/5 of the touchdowns in this win over a team that a lot of outlets had pegged as number 1 in the classification. Harm's performance was the difference maker against Eagle Valley, and McCune was excellent against Stanley Lake, but this win meant a lot for Roosevelt and their season, end quote. In turn, meaning that Milo Pascal here is our 3A Playmaker of the week here. So, as a recap, as we continue to go here, that means that Caden Madrid of Monte Vista, Playmaker of the week, Tanner Gray of Wellington, Playmaker of the week, and Milo Pascal, Playmaker of the week here. Coach V here had a few candidates here, starting with Mesa Ridge's senior receiver, Sonny Rogers, 3 receptions, 222 yards, and 3 touchdowns in their 50-47 win over Northfield. There's also Grand Junction's Will Applegate, 3 of 6, 26 yards passing and passing touchdown, 13 carries, 62 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns in their 35-14 rivalry win over Grand Junction Central here. And then Pueblo West, Gavin Lockett, only 6 pass attempts, 48 passing yards, a touchdown and a pick, but 159 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns on 17 carries in their 21-17 win over Pomona. Coach V here is going to go with Sonny Rogers here, saying, quote, probably one of the most insane stat lines I've ever seen, but going for 3 touchdowns on 3 catches in a shootout to avoid the upset against Northfield is wild, end quote. And as a receiver here, I have to agree, this stat line is bonkers. And it definitely stands out above the rest. 222 yards on 3 receptions is like, oh my God. I mean, what is that? You know, we're gonna break out the calculator here on air for Playmakers Corner, and you can hear it typing out. Hopefully, 222 divided by 3. That's 74 yards of reception, listeners. That's 74 yards of reception and a touchdown every single time that you touch the ball here. That is an excellent pick for Playmaker of the week here. Now, moving on to 5A here, there are a few good options here. There is a Trajan Frazier performance in the Milk Jug game for Arapahoe, going for 127 yards and 2 scores. You also had Brock Narva of Chatfield as they come back after spotting Horizon a few scores here. Brock Narva here going for 112 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, while also catching a touchdown and a team-high 70 yards on 4 receptions. So nearly 200 total yards from scrimmage. And then Matt Gates of Ralston Valley, a team-high 14 tackles and 2 sacks. And that is actually going to be our Playmaker of the week here. Matt Gates for Ralston Valley. Ralston Valley wins this game against Grandview 10-9. And so every single one of these tackles here mattered. I want to say it was 9 solo and 5 assisted tackles, along with 2 sacks, being a huge gear in the machine for this Ralston Valley defense that just harassed Grandview's quarterback all night long. And Matt Gates leading the way in those tackles and sacks to help Ralston Valley stay undefeated here and remain as one of the top teams in 5A. So, as a rundown from 5A all the way to 1A, Matt Gates of Ralston Valley, Sonny Rogers of Mesa Ridge, Milo Pascal, sorry if I've been butchering that the whole time, Milo, of Roosevelt, 2A, Tanner Gray of Wellington, and 1A, Caden Madrid of Monte Vista. Really weird when it's a week where I'm the only one who chooses a quarterback. But, we're here for it. And all those are our Playmakers of the Week. Once again, brought to you by Codered Coaching. Huge shout out to Codered Coaching and Cody Rosenthal, where your athletes can begin to develop their mental performance skills and reach the same highs that a lot of these players in our Playmaker of the Week segment have accomplished. Be sure to visit coderedcoaching.com or go ahead and find that email on that website to reach out to Cody Rosenthal directly to set up your next appointment to sharpen those mental skills. And that should do it for this edition of Playmakers Corner podcast. Be sure to stay tuned to all of our social medias, whether that's on Twitter at Playmaker Corner, on Instagram at Playmakers Corner, Facebook Playmakers Corner, whether that's on YouTube as well, where all of our episodes are uploaded in a video format. So be sure to listen to all of those, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and, like Breaker, I want to say. Wherever you go, just make sure that you have notifications turned on and you have the settings in your phone turned on so that way you get notified of all of our latest episodes that will continue to include these boys tackle football recaps as well as girls flag football recaps as well. So just stay tuned for all of our content coming up. I have been one of your co-hosts for this episode, Cody Stauffer, signing off.